Benjamin Blackwood was born into the crushing weight of serfdom. His parents toiled on lands they would never own, handing over a third of their harvest to a lord who viewed their lives as mere survival. Young Benjamin saw the world through a different lens, for within him resided a soul from another world. A soul that understood the tax hell they inhabited. He watched as his family paid to use the communal mill, paid to use the oven, and paid the church their tithes, until every grand ambition he harbored was nearly ground into dust by the sheer exhaustion of poverty. The turning point arrived when Benjamin was 14. While his parents performed their mandatory unpaid labor for the Lord, Benjamin went to the town market to sell hand-woven baskets and wilted vegetables. It was there that the crowd parted for a vision of gleaming armor and exquisite silk. At the center stood Cecilia, a young woman whose beauty was matched only by her staggering offer, 2 gold shields a year to serve as a traveling handyman. To put that in perspective, that single salary equaled the entire annual output of the Blackwood farm. Benjamin accepted instantly, his heart completely captivated by the radiant Cecilia. He joined her party of 7, a group of noble-born warriors who sought to emulate the legendary 7 Knights of Glory by traveling the continent to vanquish evil. But Benjamin's dream was a humble one. While the 3 noblemen in the group vied for Cecilia's affection, Benjamin remained the lowly servant. His days were spent making beds and wiping armor. He became a master of the mundane, specifically the art of laying out a perfectly smooth, wrinkle-free blanket for the knights to rest upon. Yet as they traversed the continent, saving villages from plague and standing against local bullies, Benjamin became more than a servant. He became the lubricant that kept the gears of heroism turning. He knew exactly how Calvin liked his armor polished and precisely which spices Finn required in his evening ale. Eventually, their deeds became the stuff of legend. Bards in every tavern sang of Cecilia's sword and the knight's shields, but they also sang of the hero of the blankets. They cheered for the common man who could trade 3 radishes for elven honey, the man who proved that even in the shadow of giants one could be extraordinary in the ordinary. Thus, the name Benjamin Blackwood began to echo through the streets, not as a serf but as a legend in his own right. The story of the heroic squad is a legend known to many, but that is not the tale we are here to tell. Time flies. Benjamin has been on his journey for 6 years. The stubborn chill of winter still clings to the earth, but a shocking piece of news now sweeps across the continent like a freezing gale. The old king of Windwind has passed away. At that time, Cecilia and her band of heroes were resting at a border nobleman's estate, celebrating a recent victory over a moan. Strew's beast, but the urgent message from the capital extinguished the joy like ice water. That evening, despite the crackling fire in the manor's study, the atmosphere remained heavy. Cecilia gathered her 6 companions and Benjamin, the servant who had always waited quietly in the shadows. With her back to the room, she gazed into the twilight. Then, she turned. Her voice was clear, but it carried a new royal authority. "Everyone," she began, "there is something I have kept from you. My real name is not Cecilia. I am Celia Windsor, the 2nd princess of the kingdom of Windwind." A soft gasp filled the room. Princess Celia explained that her brothers were already fighting for the throne, threatening to plunge the kingdom into civil war. "I cannot stand idly by," she declared. "I will return to the capital, and if mediation fails, I will personally contend for the throne." She looked at her friends Calvin, Lauren, Finn, Livia, Ella, and Hill, granting each of them lands and titles from her own royal domain. They were to be the foundation of her new reign. Finally, she turned to the bewildered Benjamin. With a familiar, teasing smile, she stopped him from kneeling. "As for you, Benjamin, you were never just our handyman, you were our closest partner." She placed an emblem into his trembling hand. "From this moment forward, you are Lord Blackwood. Your territory is Frosttown, on the western edge of the kingdom. It is remote, but it is entirely yours." The princess departed immediately for the capital, leaving the newly titled nobles behind. Benjamin's former companions offered their congratulations, but he sensed the shift. He was no longer a servant, but an equal. Soon, Benjamin Blackwood, the new Baron of Frosttown, began the long journey west. As his carriage bumped along, the fertile plains gave way to desolate, snow-covered hills. He stroked the cold metal of his crest, looking toward the gray, lifeless horizon. The legend of the heroic squad has ended, but the story of Benjamin Blackwood is only just beginning. The groaning of the carriage wheels finally ceased as the vehicle came to a halt on a patch of frozen earth. Benjamin lifted the heavy curtain and a rush of crisp, refreshing wind filled the cabin, dispelling the stuffy air of the long journey. He stepped down, his boots crunching softly on a thin layer of snow. He had arrived in Frost Town. Benjamin was a man who planned for the worst to avoid disappointment, but the sight before him was particularly bleak. The houses were low and haphazard, walls of crooked branches caked in mud and roofs of blackened thatch heavy with icicles. There were no windows, only narrow slits covered by animal hides. The townspeople he saw were emaciated and listless, casting wary, cloudy glances at the noble gentleman from their doorways. Benjamin felt no shock. He knew this look well. It was the look of his own birthplace. An elderly steward, respectful yet clearly perfunct. Tory led Benjamin and his companions to the center of town. Here stood the Baron's mansion, a sturdy stone house with a chimney and a proper wooden door. It was rough, but it would hold against the wind. For Benjamin, that was enough. His two companions joined him. There was Walter, a sharp-faced, towering knight from the Queen's Guard, who immediately began scouting the perimeter with the eyes of an eagle. Then there was Sullivan, a young administrator with the shrewd gaze of a businessman. Though Sullivan was clearly dissatisfied with the town's poverty, he showed Benjamin no contempt. Benjamin realized this was a gift from Princess Celia. She had given him men who were loyal to their duty rather than their prejudices. "Walter, Sullivan," Benjamin said as they entered the cold, dusty interior, "this house will be our home. We will live together as we rebuild this place." Inside, the air was frigid. They cleared a space by the fireplace and Benjamin called his first meeting. Walter stood guard at the door, hand on his sword, while Sullivan sat at the rough wooden table. Benjamin's tone turned serious. He demanded data, population, taxes, and resources. He wasn't here to manage poverty, he was here to change it. Sullivan promised to investigate the meager trade of furs and timber, while Benjamin mused on hidden treasures, perhaps minerals or unique mountain products. As the meeting ended, Sullivan suggested a grand, formal debut to establish authority. Benjamin offered a mysterious smile. "Don't worry," he said, wrapping his cloak tight against the chill. "I have a plan for that, no fancy ceremonies needed." As Benjamin stepped out into the biting wind, Sullivan turned to the silent knight. "A distinctive baron, isn't he?" he remarked with a slight smile. "It seems, Walter, we are in for a lot of work." The newly appointed baron walked along the frozen, muddy main street of Frosttown, his gaze sweeping calmly over the dilapidated houses. From behind the cracks in the doors, thin, pale-faced children peeked out, their eyes wide with curiosity. Their clothes were far thinner than his own. At the edge of town, Benjamin watched women laboriously breaking the ice of a winding stream with wooden mallets. He felt a flicker of relief. Flowing water meant less disease than stagnant ponds. He thought of ordering them to boil the water, but he suppressed the urge. Firewood was a luxury these serfs simply could not afford. By nightfall, Benjamin returned to the manor. Inside, Sullivan sat hunched over yellowed documents by the dim light of an oil lamp. "My lord," Sullivan sighed, rubbing his temples, "the accounts are a mess. The warehouse is empty, save for moldy oats and a pile of low-quality furs." Benjamin warmed his hands by the fireplace. "I noticed the town is short on timber," he mused. "Why, when the forest is so close?" Walter, standing in the shadows, spoke with grim certainty. "The forest is dangerous, sir. Hungry wolves and bee. Arrest at this time of year, logging is a death sentence for a man alone." Benjamin nodded slowly. This world was far more lethal than his previous life. He turned to his men with a sharp focus. "Sullivan, tomorrow, count every pound of those moldy oats. Walter, you will come with me to the townspeople's houses." Walter's brow furrowed. "Which ones?" "Every single one." The next morning was overcast. Benjamin and Walter set out carrying bundles of the inferior furs, coarse, balding hides that reeked of musk and rot. To the desperate people of Frosttown, however, this stench was the smell of survival. Benjamin knocked on every door. He gave the furs only to families with children, recording names and skills in a notebook as he went. The parents looked on with utter disbelief. Some even tried to kneel in the mud, but Benjamin waved them off. "Do you think those who got nothing will resent this?" Benjamin whispered to Walter. "Will they steal from the children?" Walter's voice was cold. "Theoretically, yes, unless they fear your justice, or they simply cannot survive." Benjamin smirked, all for a few stinky hides. They reached the final house at the edge of town. Unlike the others made of mud and straw, these walls were thick, smooth, and solid, almost like cement. Benjamin touched the cold surface, intrigued. He knocked firmly on the heavy wooden door. "I am Benjamin Blackwood," he announced, his voice ringing through the winter air. "Your new lord." A soft thud echoed from within the cabin, followed by the cautious creak of a door opening just a crack. A young girl, her hair bound in a coarse cloth headscarf, peered out with eyes full of wary tension. When she caught sight of Walter, the knight whose face betrayed a sharp hint of impatience, she flinched, quickly swinging the door wide. "Welcome, welcome, Baron," she stammered, her voice tight with panic. Benjamin did not enter immediately. His eyes were fixed on the unusual rammed earth wall of the dwelling. As the girl beckoned them in, Benjamin reached out, placing a hand gently on her thin shoulder to still her. "Don't be nervous," he said, his voice calm yet inquisitive. "I only wish to know, what special materials did you use to build this wall?" The girl's gaze flickered toward the structure before she lowered her head. It is just ordinary soil, sir, nothing special." Benjamin offered a meaningful smile but did not press her. "Since you say so, then so be it." Inside, the air was a revelation. Unlike the musty, sweat-stained hovels of the other townspeople, this home was spotless. It carried a fresh, faint scent of grass and wood. Benjamin looked at the girl, who was nervously twisting the hem of her clothes. "What is your name?" "Chesvia, my lord," she whispered. Benjamin nodded in approval, noting the meticulous order of the room. At his gesture, Walter stepped forward, dropping a small pile of inferior furs onto the floor with a decisive thud as if rid of a hot potato. "Keep these for the cold," Benjamin commanded. Though longing flashed in Chesvia's eyes, she protested weakly, but Benjamin was already wandering through the small space. He paused at a wooden barrel emitting a sour, compost-like odor, causing Walter to curse under his breath and cover his nose. "What is this?" Benjamin asked. "Just a trash can, sir," she evaded. His gaze then sharpened on a shelf by the stove. There sat vibrant, green vegetables, an impossible sight in the frozen wasteland of Frosttown. "Where did these come from?" he demanded. When she claimed she bought them, Benjamin stepped closer, his voice firm. "No, I am the son of serfs. I know the rhythm of the fields. These cannot be bought here. Tell me, where do they come from?" Walter leaned in, his battle-hardened aura weighing heavy on the girl until she turned pale, her lips trembling. But suddenly, the tension broke. Benjamin's stern mask melted into a gentle smile. He signaled Walter to retreat. "Don't be afraid, Chesvia. I admire you. You are a smart, special girl who knows things others do not." He paused, offering a surprising invitation. "The Baron's manor needs someone like you. Consider a position there. I will come again for your answer." Later that night, back at the cold stone mansion, the administrator Sullivan noticed a rare spark of pleasure in Benjamin's eyes. "A successful trip, sir." "Perhaps," Benjamin replied, warming his hands by the fire. "I have discovered a very interesting person." By the flickering light of a single candle, Benjamin began to write, his quill scratched against coarse papyrus as he composed a letter to his parents. He described the barren land, the cold, and the hidden hope he had found. He pleaded with them to join him, promising that his father's experienced hands would find plenty of soil to cultivate. "Your son is now someone of importance," he wrote with a touch of pride. "I can give you a stable home." He tucked this message inside a formal report destined for Princess Celia in the capital, a respectful update on his territory, carefully worded to maintain her favor. As he sealed the parchment, Benjamin looked out into the howling, pitch-black night. In a world where letters traveled slowly and risks were many, he could only wait. And hope for the future he was beginning to build. Benjamin finished his rounds, distributing the last of the furs while filling his notebook with the grim realities of Frosttown. During these visits, he stopped at Chesvia's home. The girl was still shaken, but she accepted a small, linen-wrapped bar of olive oil soap, a luxury Benjamin had kept from his days in the hero's party. To a commoner, this single silver coin's worth of fragrance was an unimaginable treasure. Benjamin knew the allure of cleanliness. He still remembered the surreal, refreshing shock of washing away years of grime when he first arrived in this world. He was confident. No striving for dignity amidst hardship could resist such a gift. By the afternoon of the third day, Benjamin and Walter returned to the mansion, chilled to the bone. they found Sullivan emerging from a mountain of old documents, his eyes sunken but bright with triumph. "Sir," Sullivan began, his voice brimming with accomplishment, "I have figured out our assets." Benjamin sat listening intently as Sullivan laid out the bleak truth. The warehouse held only 7 quarts of moldy rye and a few worthless scraps of fur. As for taxes, the previous lord had left absolutely nothing, not a single copper coin. However, Sullivan's tone shifted. "There is the Grey Whisper forest." He explained that the woods were rich with hardy oak and cedar. While the previous lord had been bullied into low-priced trades by the neighboring Baron of Blackrock, Sullivan saw a goldmine. If they could process the timber into boards or charcoal rather than selling raw logs, the profits would be massive. But he cautioned they lacked everything: manpower, tools, and safe routes. Benjamin offered a sincere praise, then a strange glint appeared in his eyes. "Insightful, Sullivan, but before we plan, I believe it is time for a show." Just then, a violent commotion erupted outside. The 3 men stepped out to find a mob of 20 townspeople. In the center, 2 men were brawling over the very furs Benjamin had gifted days prior. A woman sobbed nearby, clutching a shivering child. "What is going on?" Benjamin's voice cut through the air like a blade. A burly man named Barry pointed aggressively at his neighbor, Harrison. "It's not fair," Barry bellowed. "Why does his family get warmth while my son shivers?" Walter moved to intervene, his hand on his sword, but Benjamin remained calm. He walked to the weeping woman, looked at the frightened child, and then slowly knelt to gather the dirt-stained furs. He shook them clean and handed them back to the trembling Harrison. "I told you," Benjamin said, his voice steady and cold. "This is for your child to keep warm, take it." Benjamin turned to Barry, the local troublemaker, and stared at him with a calm that seemed to pierce right through his schemes. Your name is Barry, right?" Under the scrutiny of the Lord and the cold gaze of the night, Walter, Barry's voice withered. Yes, your Excellency." Benjamin spoke slowly, his voice carrying to every townsperson watching. "Barry, I remember you. You have 2 healthy, grown sons. When I distributed the furs, I prioritized families with young children, those who cannot survive the cold alone. This wasn't favoritism, it was survival. Your family's true struggle is hunger, not a lack of pelts." Barry opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. He lowered his head in defeat. Benjamin's gaze swept over the emaciated crowd. He raised his voice, letting it echo through the freezing air. "I know you are cold, I know you are hungry. I come from among you. I know what it feels like to have nothing," but his tone shifted, becoming firm and forceful. "I, Benjamin Blackwood, did not come here to watch you tear each other apart like wild beasts over scraps of wood and hide." He pointed to the crowd, his voice like a hammer blow. "Today you argue over pelts. Tomorrow will you draw knives over firewood? These days must end." He announced his decree. Starting tomorrow, the manor would organize teams to enter the Grey Whisper forest to collect wood. Every worker would be paid in bread and fuel. A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. The forest was home to ferocious winter beasts. Barry looked up, his voice trembling. "Sir, the beasts isn't going in just suicide." "A good question," Benjamin shouted. He whirled around and grabbed the armored hand of his knight, Walter, thrusting it high into the air. "Because you have my champion, Knight Walter." Benjamin began spinning a grand tale of Walter's achievements, slaying dire wolf packs and bears taller than houses, feats Walter had never actually performed. Walter's face froze in shock, his lips twitching as he realized his lord was a master of tall tales. Yet seeing the sudden hope in the people's eyes, Walter steeled himself. "I guarantee your safety with my honor," the knight forced out, "but you must obey." The crowd dispersed, filled with a strange new hope. Back at the mansion, Walter's face contorted with suppressed rage. "My lord, you just—" I know," Benjamin interrupted with a reassuring smile. He pushed the knight into a chair and began unfastening Walter's sword. "To apologize, I shall personally polish and maintain your blade tonight." Walter was stunned, a lord cleaning a subordinate's weapon. It was unheard of. His anger vanished, replaced by a sense of profound respect. As Benjamin worked, his advisor Suleiman whispered, "That troublemaker Barry, you arranged that scene, didn't you?" Benjamin nodded, wiping the steel. "He's the best hunter in town, now he's our second in command." Suleiman smiled, realizing the brilliance of the ploy. My lord, you don't care for aristocratic heirs, you are pragmatic. I think coming to this barren land was the right choice after all. In the flickering candlelight, Benjamin continued to polish the sword, making it bright enough to cut through any thorn in his path. The townspeople gathered in the small open space before the baron's mansion, their hands tucked deep into their sleeves to escape the biting wind. They stamped their feet, exhaling plumes of white mist, while their gazes remained fixed on the stone steps with a heavy mix of doubt and anticipation. Baron Benjamin Blackwood stood tall, his figure thin in the morning light but his back ramrod straight. Beside him stood Walter, fully armed like an iron tower, his gleaming armor projecting a silent, oppressive order. Further back, Sullivan watched the crowd. Benjamin did not waste words. He announced the winter logging order. All able-bodied men were to bring their own axes and rations to head into the mountains. Knight Walter would lead the guard, joined by Barry and several experienced hunters to defend against the wild beasts. The rewards were staggering: 3 pounds of rye per day, with extra flour or firewood for exceeding the quota. Furthermore, every participating household would receive free access to the town's public mill for the entire year. The crowd erupted. 3 pounds of rye and no mill tax, it was a godsend. Barry jumped forward, shouting, "What are you afraid of? With the knight and the baron leading, how can we let beasts bully us?" Slowly, 30 men, driven by a desperate will to survive, stepped forward. Walter, his face cold as frost, touched the hilt of his sword, a blade Benjamin had personally polished until it shone like a mirror. He began dividing the men into teams, his knightly composure dispelling the gloom in their hearts. In the days that followed, Frosttown flickered with new life. Every morning, the teams marched into the mist-shrouded Greywhisper forest. By evening, they returned, pushing felled logs into the stream to be woven into rafts. Sullivan worked tirelessly, clearing a processing site and writing to distant merchants to sell the high-quality timber. Meanwhile, Benjamin visited Chesvia again. This time, he brought a basket of freshly baked rye bread enriched with sugar, butter, and dried fruit. The aroma filled her small room. "Try it," Benjamin said casually. "I personally prefer fresh fruit. If someone could find some this time of year, I would be very happy." Chesvia hesitated, then hurried outside. She returned with a basket of hawthorns, currants, and bright red apples, still glistening with dew. Benjamin's eyes lit up. "A winter treasure," he exclaimed. Then his tone shifted to a gentle, calculated warmth. He offered her a plot of land near the manor to manage, a safer life than wandering the forest alone. Chesvia looked at the bread, then at the baron's sincere face. She realized she was like a small insect falling into a spider's web, but the spider was smiling benevolently. I can try, sir," she whispered. She did not yet realize that a baron's friendship is never truly free. It is a debt often repaid with even greater surprises. Inside the quiet study, Benjamin and Sullivan were deep in debate over the logging team's wages. Sullivan, ever the shrewd advisor, pointed out that the 3 pounds of rye paid daily was actually half the market rate. "My lord," he whispered, "in more prosperous lands, these men would demand at least 1.5 copper coins. You could drop their pay to 2 pounds of rye, and they would still be grateful." Benjamin paused, memories of his own childhood surfacing, of his family toiling in sun-drenched fields while a cruel lord found excuses to steal their meager earnings. "I know," Benjamin replied softly, "but I will not die." "Oh, that." Sullivan sighed, offering a final word of caution. "Kindness is essential for a lord, Benjamin, but generosity is not." Suddenly, a roar of excitement erupted from the streets. The 2 men rushed outside to find Walter and the logging team returning. They weren't just hauling timber, they were dragging a massive makeshift cart. On it lay the carcass of a brown bear as tall as 2 men, its skull split by a single fatal blow. Benjamin ignored the trophy and ran straight to Walter. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice thick with concern. Walter, who had been ready to boast of his martial prowess, was caught off guard by the genuine care in his lord's eyes. "No," he managed to mutter. Relieved that there were no casualties, Benjamin turned to the gathering crowd. "Behold the guardian of Frosttown," he shouted, gesturing to Walter, but the knight quickly interrupted, pointing to the hunters. "No, sir." Barry and the others stood their ground. "Without them, the beast would have killed us all." "Then you are all warriors," Benjamin declared. "Tonight we feast. Every worker and their family shall share in this meat." Benjamin didn't just watch, he grabbed a skinning knife and rolled up his sleeves. When the local cook tried to stop him, Benjamin dismissed the notion of status. "Feeding my people is more important than any title," he said. With the artistic precision of a man who had spent 6 years surviving the wilderness, he expertly butchered the beast, leaving the onlookers speechless. Later that night, inside the mansion, the three men shared a bottle of fine wine, a rare gift from Princess Celia. They laughed as they chewed the tough, gamey meat, with Benjamin jokingly blaming the bear's genetics for his cooking. Finally, Benjamin looked at the massive pelt. He decided to hang the bear's head on the mansion's main wall. It would serve as a permanent reminder that Frosttown was defined not by its cold but by its courage. The smoky jubilation of the bear meat feast has faded, leaving Frosttown in winter's cold embrace, but the air now carries a flicker of hope. Along the creek, piles of logs grow like a new forest. Under Benjamin's direction, a few townspeople have begun the grueling work of processing timber into rough boards. It is inefficient, but it is a start. While Sullivan negotiates with distant merchants, Benjamin leads the young woman, Chesvia, to a small patch of land. When they arrive, she freezes. Before her lie hundreds of acres, the former lord's private camp. "Baron," she whispers, her voice trembling, "is this the small piece you mentioned?" Benjamin coughs, looking sheepish. "Start small," he urges, "there is no rush." Chesvia proves her talent immediately. She selects a sheltered spot near water, directing helpers to build a windbreak. She sprinkles a strange, pungent powder into the soil and buries her seeds. When Benjamin warns her that nothing grows in winter, she looks up with a hint of desperation. "Consider it, a little magic," she says. Benjamin smiles, naming her his Minister of Agriculture before heading back to the grim reality of the mansion. The treasury is empty save for 20 gold shields. It is a pittance for a ruler. Sullivan warns that they cannot afford wages until the spring thaw, but Benjamin refuses to wait. He recalls a hard currency favored by nobles, high-quality charcoal. Though he possesses only vague memories of charcoal kilns from his days as a laborer, Benjamin's resilience is absolute. He leads a small team to the forest's edge to build an earthen kiln. The first attempt ends in ash. The second produces only crumbling waste, but Benjamin squats in the dirt, analyzing every failure with the townspeople. Finally, on the third attempt, they open the mud-sealed door to find a kiln full of shiny black charcoal that rings like crystal when struck. "We succeeded," the old townsman cries, his face smeared with soot and tears. A month of failure has finally yielded a fortune. And on the other side of town, inside a small windbreak, a second miracle occurs. Tiny, tender green shoots begin to poke through the frozen earth, defying the very laws of winter. The successful firing of the first batch of charcoal created ripples, like a stone thrown into stagnant water. Benjamin didn't waste a moment. He immediately appointed a resilient old townsman to lead the kiln team, recruited more labor, and established a shift system. Soon, several kilns were smoking on the edge of the forest, guarded carefully to ensure these valuable facilities remained safe. Once charcoal was added to the work-for-food system, the effects were immediate. Though the rye reserves depleted faster, the townspeople found a new sense of hope. The lifeless despair that once permeated Frosttown was replaced by a faint vitality, the sound of people busy making a living. Meanwhile, Sullivan began meticulously planning sales routes. He spread out his maps, studying the roads to the royal capital and neighboring noble territories. Charcoal, lightweight and valuable, was the perfect stepping stone to open external markets. However, as activity increased, so did the danger. Walter approached Benjamin, his expression grave. "Sir," he warned, "the guard force is stretched thin. Our logging is disturbing the wild animals and they are drawing closer. We must recruit a militia. On this land, nothing is more important than force." Benjamin agreed. He thought of muskets, powerful weapons that could bridge the gap in training, but the thought quickly faded. Years ago, he had tried to replicate gunpowder, but the laws of this world seemed to reject it. Sulfur and saltpeter produced only weak hisses, and the natural dust crystals lost all power when ground into powder. Even electricity seemed locked away by an invisible force. He had been ridiculed for these failures. Only Celia had ever encouraged him to keep thinking. But then, nearly forgotten experiment flashed through his mind. Before he could dwell on it, Chesvia arrived with news. Benjamin led Sullivan and Walter to a protected experimental field. There, amidst the frigid cold, were cabbage and lentil sprouts, vibrant and green. Incredible, Sullivan whispered, crouching to touch the defying greenery. Walter remained silent, his eyes wide with shock. Benjamin smiled, introducing Chesvia as their new field mage in charge of agriculture. But Sullivan's gaze turned sharp. Sir, crops do not grow like this in winter. This is no ordinary skill. It is a miracle. He looked at Chesvia with a hint of wariness. Miss Chesvia, I think you need to explain. Chesvia stiffened. She looked at Benjamin, then whispered, Please, find a place where no one else is around. Back at the mansion in the privacy of Benjamin's study, Chesvia stood before them. Slowly, she removed her headscarf. In an instant, her long, white hair, as pure as snow and shimmering with a faint luster, cascaded down like a waterfall, revealing a face of exceptional, haunting beauty. Inside Benjamin's cramped study, the air grew heavy with anticipation. Chesvia stood before the three men and slowly reached for her headscarf. As the fabric fell away, her hair cascaded down like a shimmering, white waterfall, pure as snow and glowing with a faint, otherworldly luster. The reaction was instantaneous. The chosen ones of the Pale Church, Walter hissed, his hand tightening on his sword hilt, trembling with a mix of awe and instinctual fear. Beside him, Sullivan's eyes sharpened. This was trouble. Benjamin, too, felt the weight of the revelation. He had suspected Chesvia possessed special abilities, but he never imagined a connection to the Pale Church, a power so vast it influenced entire kingdoms. These chosen ones were the elite of humanity, granted the supernatural blade of thought to rival the most dangerous races, and that flawless white hair was the unmistakable mark of the Pale Goddess. Chesvia's voice broke the silence, filled with a desperate urgency. Please, do not associate me with the Church. This power is inherited from my parents, who severed all ties with them before I was born. I do not believe in their goddess. Benjamin stepped forward, his gaze piercing. You have hidden this your entire life. Why tell us now? Chesvia met his eyes with newfound determination. I refuse to live like a shadow anymore. I need a place where I can use my talents without fear, and you are my choice. Benjamin didn't hesitate. He turned to Sullivan and Walter, his voice ringing with the authority of a true lord. Chesvia's identity is now a top-secret matter of Frostfire Town. Not a single detail is to be revealed without my permission. Yes, sir, they responded in unison. Relieved, Chesvia explained her gift. Her mind blade allowed her to influence the very bloodline of plants, accelerating growth and fusing traits together. Benjamin recognized it immediately as a form of genetic breeding. He promised her a private research space and all the resources she required. Later that evening, the tension melted away over a steaming pot of roe deer and radish stew. To Chesvia's shock, the Baron himself prepared the meal, wearing a coarse apron and serving his men like equals. When she asked why she couldn't simply dye her hair to hide her identity, Chesvia sighed. The color always returns the moment I use my power. It is a quirk of the goddess, perhaps. As they ate, the formal boundaries of lord and subject began to blur, replaced by the quiet, flickering warmth of a shared secret. A few days later, a merchant named Raymond braved the biting wind and the lingering snow to finally reach Frost Town. Wrapped in a thick fur coat, his horse puffing white smoke into the frozen air, Raymond surveyed the land with a weary, skeptical eye. He had been lured here by a letter from a fellow townsman named Sullivan, who described the area as a treasure trove of opportunity. Yet, as Raymond looked at the dilapidated mud houses and the sallow-faced townspeople, he muttered to himself, "This god-forsaken place, can it really be as good as the letter described?" He had come to inspect timber and charcoal for his newly established Grey Falcon Trading Company. Benjamin received him personally and without unnecessary pleasantries led him straight to the creek. There, Raymond examined high-quality logs, processed planks, and samples of glossy black charcoal. After a careful inspection, a satisfied look finally crossed the merchant's face. He admitted that the hard-grained oak was superior and the charcoal exceeded his expectations. He promised to return with a caravan once the spring thaw arrived, though he added with a wry smile, "The road to your place is truly treacherous. This trip almost shook my bones to pieces." Once Raymond departed, Benjamin immediately summoned Sullivan to discuss the vital necessity of road construction. While Sullivan agreed that a road was a lifeline for trade, he warned of the immense costs: professional craftsmen, specialized tools, and vast amounts of stone and sand. Seeking further growth, Benjamin turned to the druid Chesvia. He asked if she could use her abilities to solve their livestock feed shortage. Chesvia cautioned that while she could attempt to breed cold-resistant forage grasses, such a feat would take a great deal of time. That night, Benjamin sat alone in the flickering light of the manor to read 2 letters Raymond had delivered. The first, sealed with a lily emblem and smelling of faint flowers, was from Princess Celia. Her elegant handwriting spoke of the oppressive power struggles in the capital and warned Benjamin to act cautiously, as the Duke of the West had aligned against the royal family. She spoke fondly of their past travels together, her words tinged with a deep, unspoken longing. The second letter was written en rouge paper in the crooked, joyful hand of his father. It was a message of pride and hope. His family was preparing to join him in the spring, bringing dreams of golden wheat fields and the skills of his brother, Jean, now a talented blacksmith's apprentice. As Benjamin looked out into the dark night, a sense of peace finally settled over him. The road ahead was long, but he was no longer walking it alone. The preliminary estimate for the road construction was steep. Sullivan, ever the cautious advisor, warned Benjamin that a standard trade route would cost at least 25 gold shields, and that was the optimistic version. He subtly suggested a cheaper alternative, using the kingdom's laws to conscript the townspeople for forced, unpaid labor. Benjamin listened in silence, the rhythmic tapping of his fingers the only sound in the room. He thought of his own family, their weary, numb faces under the yoke of noble entitlement. "Roads need to be built," Benjamin finally declared, "but we will do it in sections." He prioritized 2 internal routes, one from the town center to the Grey Whisper Forest and another to the lumberyard. By using riverbed rubble and focusing on efficiency over grandeur, Sullivan estimated the cost would drop to just 5 gold shields. With the plan set, Benjamin ordered Sullivan to the Silverbrook territory to replenish their rye reserves and hire skilled craftsmen. He authorized 15 gold shields for the mission, urging his advisor to use the funds wisely. Before leaving, Sullivan pressed one final point. The Baron's mansion needed a proper staff to maintain the dignity of his office. Benjamin waved him off, though his resistance was beginning to soften. Later, Benjamin visited the experimental fields managed by Chesvia. Amidst the biting cold, the frost cabbage and frost beans were miraculously green. Chesvia warned that while these crops survived the winter, their yields were low. She lectured him on the necessity of crop rotation to keep the soil from turning into a wasteland. Benjamin agreed, pushing her to research forage grass for future livestock. When he lamented the slow pace of progress, Chesvia offered a rare smile of encouragement. She told him the townspeople were already talking. The tax-collecting lord was gone, replaced by a baron who truly cared. But the warmth of that moment was short-lived. As evening fell, Benjamin returned to the mansion to find Walter waiting with a grim report. The patrol had discovered strange tracks deep in the forest, clean, blade-like cuts in the earth. Traps had been triggered and destroyed, yet no blood or fur remained. "It wasn't human," Walter whispered, "and it wasn't any animal we know." The threat of the unknown hung heavy in the air. Benjamin acted instantly, ordering a warning posted for the townspeople and offering a reward of 5 pounds of rye for any information. Something was lurking in the shadows of the forest, and the piece of frosttone was now you. Endure threat. With trepidation and a glimmer of hope, an old woodcutter, his face etched by time, knocked on the door of the Baron's mansion. "Sir," he rasped, his back hunched, "those footprints, everyone knows about them." Through the old man's fragmented words, Benjamin learned the chilling truth. For years, Frosttown had been haunted by monsters described as a blasphemous fusion of giant insect and hungry wolf. A decade ago, a squad of militia was sent into the mountains to hunt them, but not a single soul returned. Since then, the previous lord had simply turned a blind eye, leaving the people to a fate of quiet resignation. Benjamin felt a surge of uncontrollable anger. How could such a threat be ignored? A few days later, a glimmer of progress arrived. Sullivan returned with 6 cartloads of rye, beans, and salt, along with a skilled stonemason named Malef. With new trade agreements in place, Benjamin launched a road construction project. The townspeople, motivated by food rewards and the Baron's own presence on the worksite, finally began to build. Even Chesvia's Frost series crops yielded a vibrant harvest of jade-green cabbages. But the peace was shattered on a gloomy afternoon. Bari, a member of the guard, stumbled back to the mansion covered in blood. A horrific laceration on his shoulder exposed the bone. They were so fast, he gasped, his voice trembling with terror. Black shadows, claws like scythes, and glowing green eyes. He wept as he revealed that young hands had been dragged into the woods to buy the others time to escape. The threat was no longer a legend, it was at their doorstep, less than 2 miles from the new charcoal kilns. "Walter, gather the men," Benjamin commanded. "Bring torches and steel." When Walter protested that the Baron should stay behind for his own safety, Benjamin's voice turned sharp and authoritative. "Only cowardly nobles hide behind their guards. A true leader fights side by side with his people." Benjamin disappeared into the mansion and re-emerged transformed. Gone were the simple clothes of a farmer. He stood tall in well-maintained leather armor, a massive hardwood bow slung across his back and a high-quality longsword at his hip. Walter stared in disbelief, a fragment of an old folk song * the blanket and the bow * echoing in his mind. The hero who once spread blankets and cut bread had shed his disguise, and now his blade pointed toward the darkness, gleaming with a cold, ruthless light. The Baron's sudden transformation from a refined noble to a man of iron resolve injected a surge of adrenaline into his anxious guards. Even Walter, the seasoned knight, suppressed his urge to argue. He recognized the look of a leader whose mind was made up. "All personnel," Walter barked, his voice regaining its icy edge. "Check weapons and torches, maintain alert formation, Bari, lead the way." The group, consisting of Walter, Benjamin, and 8 militiamen armed with spears and logging axes, plunged into the somber gray-whisper forest. As they moved deeper, the canopy swallowed the sun, leaving them in a ghostly twilight. A faint, unsettlingly sweet odor hung in the air. Bari, the hunter, guided them past signs of a violent struggle: torn bushes, deep gouges in tree trunks, and eerie, blade-like footprints. "Stay alert," Walter growled, signaling a halt. Before them lay a scene of devastation. Dark, congealed blood splattered the moss. A torn piece of leather armor hung from a root, the very spot where their comrade Hans had been taken. Benjamin quietly nocked an arrow, his eyes scanning the shadows with the lethal instinct of a veteran adventurer. Suddenly, whoosh. A black shadow darted from the brush, eyes gleaming with a chilling green light. "Left," Walter roared, drawing his steel. But a whistling arrow was faster. With a sickening thud, Benjamin's shot pinned the creature to a tree. Walter stepped in, his blade carving a sharp arc that severed the monster's head in a spray of green gore. The creature was a nightmare, a wolf's frame with twisted, insect-like limbs and sickle-shaped claws. "Keep going," Benjamin commanded, his voice calm. "Follow the blood." They fought their way to a hidden cave where the stench of rot was overwhelming. Walter insisted on entering first to scout the darkness. But minutes later, a roar echoed from the depths, followed by the scream of a dying man. Benjamin didn't hesitate. "With me," he shouted, charging into the gloom. Inside, Walter was locked in a desperate struggle with a behemoth, a horrific hybrid of a giant bear and a chitinous insect. As the beast raised a massive paw to crush the knight, Benjamin hurled a spear with all his might. The distraction gave Walter the opening he needed. With a whirlwind of silver steel, the knight sheared off the monster's insectoid appendages. They lured the thrashing beast toward the entrance, where the militia waited with a wall of spears. As the creature stumbled, Walter delivered the killing blow, driving his sword through its open maw. Exhausted and bloodied, Walter knelt. "My lord, I failed you, I had to be rescued." Benjamin placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "No one could have predicted this horror, Walter. We both share the burden of this day. Now, let us tend to the wounded." The nightmare was laid bare on the open ground before the Baron's mansion. Grotesque, impossible monsters, creatures that defied all reason, were piled like cordwood. Children's screams rose and fell as the townspeople gathered, staring with a mixture of paralyzing fear and irresistible curiosity. Through the crowd walked Benjamin. His leather armor was still stained with blood, his face calm as he directed the disposal of the corpses. The people watched him with a new, complex emotion. This was a lord who did more than lay carpets or repair roads. He was a leader who personally took up arms to face the darkness. But victory had a heavy price. One militiaman was dead, and another lay on the verge of passing, his abdomen torn open and his face ashen. In a place like Frost Town, such a wound was a death sentence. Suddenly, Chesvia, the Minister of Agriculture, rushed forward, her apron still covered in dirt. She didn't reach for magic or a blade. Instead, she opened a cloth bundle filled with scalpels, bone saws, and medicated thread. "Sir," she said firmly, "let me take a look." What followed was a display of surgical precision that left the onlookers breathless. With steady hands, Chesvia cleaned the wound, trimmed the broken bone, and stitched the muscle layer by layer, as if mending fine fabric. There was no supernatural power here, only the incredible skill of a woman who, in another life, would have been a master physician. Benjamin stepped forward to address the stunned crowd. His voice rang out with authority. "The Baron's palace will bear all medical expenses. Furthermore, every guard in this operation is exempt from taxes for 6 months and awarded 3 silver shields. To the family of our fallen warrior, 1 gold shield in compensation." The announcement exploded through the crowd like cold water on boiling oil. Such generosity was unheard of. Later, as Chesvia packed her tools, Benjamin joked about making her the Minister of Health. She waved her hands in frantic resistance, insisting she only wanted to be a carefree farmer. But the mystery remained. Examining the monster's remains, Chesvia noted their primitive digestive systems. "They shouldn't be able to survive," she whispered. "They must be drawing energy from something unknown, something in the environment." Benjamin nodded gravely. They would return to the Blackwater ravine soon, but for now, Frost Town was transforming. The sound of axes and saws echoed from dawn till dusk, and the charcoal kilns burned day and night, as a new order began to rise from the frozen earth. Stone Cliff territory is a land of towering peaks and treacherous paths, a strategic gateway to the capital that has become the epicenter of a brutal struggle for the throne. Princess Celia sent Calvin here for his unwavering will, hoping he could act as a stabilizing force in this chaotic land. Calvin, the second son of Earl Ironrock, is a renowned knight who joined the princess's party out of devout admiration. He arrived filled with confidence, believing he could clear all obstacles just as he had once slain demons, but reality proved far more complex. The inhabitants of Stone Cliff are as rugged as the rocks themselves. Harboring a deep distrust of outsiders, local nobles, accustomed to their own shady dealings, resent this young lord who represents the princess's interests. Calvin's approach was direct and forceful. He viewed any disobedience as a stumbling block to the great cause. "Anyone who does not support Lady Celia," he declared, "is a traitor." Within 3 short months, the land was engulfed in flames. Calvin launched dozens of swift purges, leading from the front in gleaming armor. He won victory after victory, yet after each triumph he felt an indescribable weariness. He could suppress open resistance, but he could not stop the discontent that sprouted like weeds in the shadows. He wondered, why did the civilians he fought for look at him with such resentment? Today he leads an expedition against a neighboring baron. At dawn, in the cold, damp hall of the stone castle, servants dress him in his finely crafted plate. As the last piece is fastened, Calvin frowns. The armor is stiff, the joints do not move smoothly, and the metal feels rigid against his skin. This subtle discomfort unlocks a floodgate of memory. He thinks back to his travels with the princess, and to Benjamin, the quiet boy who always stayed in the corner. Benjamin used to polish this armor with such care that it felt like a second skin, fitting, comfortable, and flexible. "The workmanship here is rough," Calvin mutters. "These servants, they cannot compare." He wonders how Benjamin is doing in that unremarkable place, Frost Town. Calvin had even planted an informant there, hoping to hear news of the boy's failure, perhaps to balance his own current frustration. The warmth of memory fades into a barely audible sigh. Calvin shakes off the distraction, his gaze sharpening once more. He strides toward the castle doors, letting in the cold morning light. Outside, his army waits. He decides that upon his return, he will severely punish the incompetent servant who failed to maintain his gear in Stone Cliff territory. Any minor flaw could be fatal. For the sake of Princess Celia, he must be perfect. Walter stepped into the Baron's mansion, the heavy fur of his coat dusted with fresh snow. The warmth from the fireplace, fueled by Benjamin's improved charcoal, seeped into his chilled bones. In the hall, Sullivan sat hunched over documents by the flickering light of an oil lamp. "Lord Walter," Sullivan said, his face wearing that usual enigmatic smile. "The Baron is with Minister Chesvia, discussing agricultural matters. You'll have to wait." Walter grunted, rubbing his numb fingers. He complained about the clumsy new militia, but his mind was elsewhere. He found it inappropriate for the Baron to spend so much time alone with Chesvia, a woman rumored to be linked to the Pale Church. Still, he kept his tongue. He retreated to his room, but a soft knock followed. It was Sullivan. The smile was gone now, replaced by a sharp, piercing gaze. He leaned in, his voice a mere whisper. "Lord Walter, have you reported everything here to your true master?" Walter's muscles tensed instantly. His hand flew to his empty belt, searching for a sword that wasn't there. "Sullivan, what are you saying?" Sullivan remained calm. "Relax, Sir Knight like you, I am here on a special mission." He gestured toward the window. "But look at Frost Toe. And it is chaotic, yes, but it has vitality. People are working, their eyes are shining. This life was brought by Benjamin Blackwood." Sullivan stepped closer. "We've all been thrown away, Walter. We can't go back, so why not choose the side that truly needs us?" When Sullivan left, Walter sat in the dark for a long time. Finally, he took up his quill. He began to write to his master, detailing the new roads and the charcoal production. But when his pen moved toward the Baron's unconventional bravery and his own shifting loyalty, he hesitated. A drop of ink fell, staining the page like a dark omen. Walter crumpled the paper and threw it into the fire. He wrote a new, shallow report, sealing his choice with the wax. Days later, at Stone Cliff Fortress, the victorious Lord Calvin opened that very letter. He expected to read of Benjamin's failure. Instead, he read of success, of logging teams, wiped-out monsters, and a town filled with hope. Calvin's brow furrowed in a cold, mounting fury. How could a mere servant, a man who once polished his armor, thrive in such a wasteland? Frustrated and seeking to reclaim his sense of superiority, Calvin turned to the door and roared for his servants. He would find someone to punish. Someone to remind him that he was still the master, and Benjamin was nothing more than dust. Benjamin was an engineer forged in the fires of a second-tier university and the grueling dust of construction sites. For 2 years, he labored among steel bars and cement mixers, a hardship that stripped away his academic softness but left him with a profound mastery of materials. After a soul-crushing stint at a design institute, fate has finally handed him a blank canvas, the barren land of Frost Town. On the edge of Greywhisper Forest, Benjamin begins his first work, a road unlike any the locals have ever seen. Under the bewildered gazes of Malef the stonemason and Sullivan the administrator, Benjamin sketches a complex cross-section on rough papyrus. He explains that a simple layer of gravel is a failure. They need a stable, multi-layered roadbed. He organizes the townspeople into specialized teams, replacing inefficient manual labor with a suspended tamping tool, a massive stone hammer on a wooden frame that strikes the earth with a rhythmic thump, thump, thump asterisk. To ensure the slope is perfect for drainage, he even crafts a crude level using a crystal and a water-filled trough. As the sturdy road extends, Sullivan's confusion turns to awe. He asks if this is some lost, ancient technique. Benjamin only smiles. He is already looking toward the dilapidated houses swaying in the wind. "Sullivan," he says seriously, "we aren't just building roads, we are building a new town." He introduces a word that sounds foreign and awkward to the locals: concrete. Benjamin explains the process, firing limestone in kilns to create lime, then mixing it with clay, sand, and gravel. He sets up a vertical kiln against the hillside. And begins a series of grueling experiments in the Baron's backyard. The first attempts are failures, crumbling mud or cracked slabs, but Benjamin persists. Finally, he cracks open a wooden mold to find a solid, grayish-blue slab. It rings with a dull, metallic sound when struck. It doesn't shatter, it doesn't crack. Sullivan realizes the implications instantly. This artificial stone is a gold mine, a way to build fortifications and warm houses without the cost of quarrying. That night, by the flickering light of an oil lamp, Benjamin retreats to his study. He sketches floor plans, heated brick beds, and drainage systems. He is no longer just an engineer, he is a visionary. For the first time, his designs aren't being trampled by clients, they are rising from the earth, one solid block at a time. After the initial excitement of victory came the grueling reality of scale. Benjamin knew the gap between a laboratory success and a massive construction site was a wide, dangerous canyon. He refused to be blinded by his first triumph. Behind the Baron's mansion, he established a sprawling experimental field. He became a man obsessed, systematically adjusting the ratios of lime, water, and aggregate, recording the exact setting times of every batch. He watched the mixtures at 3 days, 7 days, and 28 days, testing their strength under freezing cold and blistering heat. The process was tedious and often it failed. Some batches hardened too fast to use, others stayed soft as mud, leaving deep dents when pressed, but each failure was a lesson. Finally, he perfected 2 baseline mixes, one for rapid strength and another more durable for the heavy walls and floors. Meanwhile, Sullivan organized the supply chain. Limestone quarries were opened and the screening of sand was standardized. It was time for the real test. Benjamin chose the new public warehouse as his first project. He didn't just want a building, he wanted to train an army of craftsmen. The site became a bustling symphony of labor. The crushing group pulverized the lime, the measuring group filled wooden hoppers with precision, and the mixing group, strong laborers with iron shovels, turned dry powder into a uniform gray slurry. Benjamin acted as the conductor, his voice ringing out over the noise. Mix evenly, pour continuously, vibrate it thoroughly. When the wooden forms were finally removed, the townspeople gasped. Before them stood a seamless blue-gray wall solid as a mountain. When tapped, it produced a deep, resonant ring. The miracle of stone soup was real. While Sullivan began whispering to visiting merchants about this mysterious new material, shrouding it in high-value secrecy, Benjamin turned back to his blueprints. He sketched a vision for a new town, row houses with centralized heating, drainage networks, and a grand reconstruction of the Baron's mansion, featuring gravity-fed water and underfloor heating. But a shadow loomed. Over these grand designs, the Baron's treasury was a leaky funnel. Sullivan's warnings were growing sharper. At this rate, the gold would vanish long before the next harvest. As the winter ice finally began to melt into mud, Benjamin looked toward the horizon. The merchant caravans were coming. He had to do more than just sell a product. He had to find a way to save Frosttown's fragile economy before the gold ran out. Following Benjamin's instructions, Sullivan dispatched polite letters to the neighboring lords, adopting a humble tone to propose a friendly visit from the Baron of Frosttown. These meetings were critical. The local strongmen controlled the markets, roads, and water. Their favor would determine if Frosttown could survive. Benjamin's first target was Blackrock territory, a barren, rugged land known for its military might and rich mineral veins. Its ruler, Baron Guise, was a warlike man who rose from commoner to nobility through sheer grit. Benjamin prepared a strategic gift, a cartload of high-quality charcoal. The journey was grueling. What should have been a half-day trip took until dusk as the carriage bounced over muddy paths and rocky hills. Finally, Blackrock Fortress appeared, a grim military stronghold perched atop a desolate mountain. At the gates, Benjamin's party faced a rigorous, almost harassing search. Even the charcoal was poked and prodded. "A show of force," Walter muttered, recognizing the psychological tactic. Benjamin simply nodded, remaining calm. Inside the flickering torchlight of the great hall, Baron Guise stood tall and robust, like a bear poised to pounce. When they shook hands, Benjamin felt palms as rough as sandpaper. "You've wielded a sword," Guise noted deeply. Benjamin admitted his past travels with the princess, leading to a relaxed conversation about the bard's tales of their adventures. However, Benjamin quickly steered the talk toward business. He spoke of Blackrock's struggle. Their iron was average because they lacked the timber for high-heat forging. "Your costs are too high," Benjamin stated firmly. "I have brought high-quality charcoal that burns hotter and longer, but the biggest obstacle we both face is the lack of a smooth road." Guise looked confused, his brow furrowing. "My brain is malfunctioning," he admitted bluntly. "These numbers, they are for my wife." He summoned Elena, a petite woman with refined manners and a razor-sharp mind. Benjamin pitched her his grand vision, a regional development commune. Instead of fighting, the lords would pool resources, Frosttown's charcoal and tech, Blackrock's stone and labor, to build a road network. They would then collect tolls, turning a cost into a profit-sharing industry. Elena was impressed by his foresight. After Benjamin departed, she turned to her husband. "His ideas are ahead of their time," she whispered, "but his logic is sound. This man sees much further than the rest." The first stone of an alliance had been laid. As Benjamin's carriage rattles away from Blackrock Castle, Baron Gus scratches his stubble, his brow furrowed in confusion. He turns to his wife, Elena, holding the draft Benjamin left behind, a proposal for a regional development commune. Gus is wary. The idea of sharing power and resources feels wrong. But Elena's eyes shine with a sharp, unprecedented light. She explains that this isn't about giving power away, it is about concentrating it. Just as a commander gathers his bravest men into a vanguard to break a line, this commune will unite their strengths. Blackrock has the stone and the soldiers, Frost Town has the technology, others have the coin. By building these roads together, they don't just lower costs, they create a win-win for everyone. Gus finally grins as he grasps the military metaphor. He agrees to let Elena handle the details. She decides to draft a reply immediately, inviting Benjamin's surveyors to begin planning the route. Inside his departing carriage, Benjamin is nursing an aching back and a growing curiosity about the mysterious Lady Elena. He stops in a local village, bribing a farmer for information. The man whispers that the lady is a witch, a common label for any woman too clever for her station. Benjamin chuckles, recognizing the same superstitious awe that follows his own advisor, Chesvia. He feels a pang of envy for the Baron's private army, but he knows Frost Town cannot yet afford such a force. For now, he must play the fox to Blackrock's tiger. In the days that follow, Benjamin embarks on a whirlwind tour. He visits Silver Creek, Stonebridge, and Ash Marsh. Through tireless negotiation, he convinces the wary lords that this alliance is about trade, not politics. One by one, they join. A preliminary alliance is formed. Frost Town will lead with technical expertise, Blackrock will provide the stone and security, and the others will provide the gold and labor. When Benjamin presents his master sketches, complete with elevation, drainage, and roadbed structures, the other lords fall silent. They have no choice but to follow his lead. By transforming the obstacles of territorial borders into a shared mission, Benjamin has done the impossible. He has turned a debt-ridden dream into a regional engine for growth, and the first stones of the Great Road are ready to be laid. Walter led a newly equipped guard squad back into the dark, damp caves of Blackwater Ravine. The men wore the finest leather armor in Frosttown, wielding gleaming spears and axes, their faces set with the quiet confidence of true combat experience. But the search was disappointing. Deep within the cave, they found only the pungent odor of a beast's den and the gnawed remains of old prey. There were no hidden passages, no glowing minerals, just cold, natural rock. Just as Walter prepared to leave, a sharp-eyed guard spotted something out of place among the broken bones. A glass bottle, in this rugged land, transparent GL. As is a luxury of the highest order, Walter carefully picked it up. The small, exquisite vessel was sealed with wax, containing a viscous, luminous green liquid that seemed to flow with a life of its own. Walter brought the prize back to Frosttown and presented it to Benjamin. The young lord held it to the light, his brow furrowed. "This has nothing to do with nature," Benjamin muttered. He immediately summoned Chesvia. "Take a look at this. It was in the monster's lair. I believe it is the source of their mutation." Chesvia sighed, looking at the emerald liquid. "Sir, I am your Minister of Agriculture and a mediocre doctor. Now you want me to be a chemist?" She shook her head, though she took the bottle carefully. "I will see how it reacts to plants, but do not get your hopes up." As she reached the door, she paused, her voice softening with a hint of longing. "By the way, my lord, prepare more farmland. Next year I want to see this town surrounded by golden wheat." Benjamin smiled warmly. "I will wait for that day." In the following weeks, Benjamin turned his focus to the people. He transformed a room in the mansion into a makeshift classroom, using charcoal and wooden boards to teach the townspeople the basics of construction, levers, and blueprints. These were men in their 30s, weathered by hard labor, who had never even held a pen. As he watched them struggle to understand, Benjamin felt a deep wave of emotion. It wasn't that they were slow, it was that they had never been given the chance to learn. Knowledge was a luxury they could never afford. He made a silent vow then he would build a real school. He would give the children of this territory a future beyond the mud. Then, as the snow finally melted, a dusty convoy struggled down the muddy road toward the town. On one of the carts sat a large, nervous family. Old Blackwood, a man with a weathered face, turned to his children. "Listen, Benjamin is a baron now, a true nobleman. We are family, yes, but you must show him respect." His son Jean, a disheveled blacksmith apprentice, fiddled with his tools and rolled his eyes. "I know, Dad, you've said it 1,000 times." But as the outline of Frosttown appeared on the horizon, their bickering stopped. There it was, the home of the son of a serf, who was now the master of the land. The cart creaked and groaned through the thick mud as it crossed into Frostwood. The Blackwood family held their breath. their eyes scanning the land that was to be their new home. Instead of a lifeless border town, they found a place pulsing with an unusual vitality. In the distance, a solid road stretched toward the gray whisper forest, and by the stream, the air was thick with the rhythmic asterisk clang-clang-clang of hammers against timber and charcoal. "Dad," whispered young Marie, tugging her father's sleeve, "this place, it's different than Benjamin's letters." Old Blackwood didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the stone house at the town center, the Baron's mansion. As the cart stopped, the family froze before the unassuming wooden door. A strange timidity gripped the old man. Was he afraid of his own son, afraid that the title of Baron had erased the boy he once knew? Suddenly, a clear voice broke the silence from behind. "What are you all doing at the entrance? Who are you?" They turned to see a young woman, her headscarf dusty and her clothes speckled with fresh mud from the fields. The eldest son, Jean, stepped forward awkwardly. "We are the family of Benjamin Blackwood." The woman's face lit up. "Benjamin's family, I'm Chesvia. Please come in, don't be shy." She led them into a hall warmed by a roaring fire, serving them sweet mead and bright red apples. When old Blackwood cautiously asked who she was, she smiled proudly. "I am the Minister of Agriculture, his partner, and," she added softly, "his friend." Just then footsteps echoed in the corridor. The curtain lifted and there stood Benjamin. He was dressed in fine clothes, yet his cuffs were stained with ink. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Benjamin looked at his father's wrinkles, his mother's patched apron, and the brother he hadn't seen in 6 years. The air felt heavy with the distance of their new social ranks until Benjamin strode forward. Without a word of formality, he pulled his stiff-backed brother into a tight, sincere hug. "You must be tired from the journey," he murmured. He then knelt to pinch little Marie's cheek, his face softening into a true smile. "I've waited a long time to do that." As Benjamin stepped away to finish his official business, Chesvia turned to the family. "Please," she said earnestly, "don't treat him like a strange nobleman. In his heart, he is still your son, and he is counting on you to help him build this land." After Benjamin left, a subtle silence fell over the hall, broken only by the occasional crackle of charcoal in the fireplace. The Blackwood family sat in the lingering shadow of their reunion. Old Blackwood stared blankly at the doorway, his hands still clutching a cup of warm mead. Chesvia, sensing the family's awkwardness, stepped in with a warm smile. "Madam, please sit down," she urged Anna, the old man's wife. "The Baron's mansion doesn't have many rules. Benjamin hates formalities." Anna sat tentatively on the edge of her chair, her fingers nervously twisting her tattered apron. Thank you, Miss Minister," she whispered. "Just call me Chesvia," she replied, pulling up a chair with a relaxed air. She turned her attention to Jean Blackwood, a burly man who looked utterly lost. Noticing the scars of a blacksmith on his hands, she struck up a conversation. "Mr. Jean, Benjamin tells me you are an excellent blacksmith." Jean's dark face flushed with embarrassment. "Not outstanding," he muffled, "just making a living." "Don't worry," Chesvia reassured him. "Frosttown needs craftsmen. Benjamin has already planned a blacksmith shop right next to the manor. He says the entire territory from farm tools to the guards' weapons will depend on you." Jean's eyes lit up as if a ray of light had pierced the darkness. He really said that. "Of course, he even drew up the sketches, just waiting for your expert feedback." At that moment, Benjamin returned from his business with the Chamber of Commerce. Though he looked tired, his eyes brightened to see his family settling in. He walked to his parents, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Father, mother, was the journey smooth?" Old Blackwood looked at his son, now a baron, yet still the same boy he knew. "No trouble," the old man rasped. "But Benjamin, are you truly doing well here? This place looks difficult." Benjamin smiled with quiet confidence. "The hardship is temporary, father. Things are changing. We have wood, charcoal, and Chesvia. She can make the land work miracles." He then turned to his brother, Jean. "Rest for a few days, then the blacksmith shop is yours. Before you arrived, we didn't have a single proper smith in town. We need you." Jean's answer was crisp and full of energy. "No problem, leave it to me." Finally, Benjamin knelt before his little sister, Maria, who was quietly munching on a red apple. "Marie, do you like your new home?" She nodded vigorously, her eyes wide. "I like it, the apple is sweet." Benjamin chuckled, then asked his parents why the other siblings hadn't come. Old Blackwood sighed, explaining that the third brother had joined a monastery while the sisters were married with families of their own. Benjamin went silent for a moment, realizing how their paths had diverged. "Time flies," he whispered. As evening approached, Benjamin introduced his right-hand men, Walter, the Minister of War, and Suleiman, the Minister of Administration. The mansion, once empty and cold, was suddenly brimming with life. In the days that followed, the family found their place. Sarah began assisting Suleiman with paperwork, little Maria followed Chesvia to learn about magical plants, and old Blackwood studied new farming techniques. But it was Jean who made the quickest impact. Standing before a pile of iron ore and a group of eager young apprentices, he puffed out his chest. "I became a smith to forge gleaming swords," he declared with a hint of his old arrogance. Benjamin laughed, clapping his brother on the shoulder. "My good brother, practice something down to earth first. After all, an iron sword cuts people, but an iron plow cuts the ground." The Silver Creek Territory, a prosperous hub of trade, played host to the first formal meeting of the Regional Development Commune. Inside the Lord of Silver Creek's magnificent three-story manor, the air in the second-floor drawing room was thick with tension. Baron Guise of Blackrock sat like a mountain in a heavy oak chair, his ceremonial robes straining against his massive frame. Beside him leaned a sheath. Less greatsword, its cold metallic sheen terrifying the servants who scurried to serve tea. Nearby, the Baron of Stonebridge, a ruddy-faced man with a protruding belly, tapped the table impatiently. "This Baron of Frosttown is far too arrogant," he barked, "making us wait." The elderly Baron of Ashmarsh stroked his gray beard, his cloudy eyes flickering with shrewdness as he urged patience. Meanwhile, their host, Erwin Hawthorne, the wealthy president of the Merchant Guild, sipped his wine in silence, his calm gaze fixed on the door. Finally, the door swung open. Benjamin Blackwood strode in, followed by his aide, Sullivan. "My apologies," Benjamin said with a slight, practiced bow. "A small accident on the road delayed us." As Benjamin took his seat, the Baron of Stonebridge pounced. "You expect us to provide gold and manpower while Frosttown only offers technology. It is invisible, intangible." The old Baron of Ashmarsh nodded in agreement, skeptical of building roads on ethereal promises. But Erwin Hawthorne intervened. "Baron Blackwood's methods could save us hundreds of gold shields in maintenance alone," he countered firmly. "And remember, this entire commune was his vision." The room fell quiet until the deep, gravelly voice of Baron Guise rang out. He gripped the hilt of his greatsword, asking the question that truly mattered. "Who divides the tolls? Who pays the guards? My people will not work for nothing." Benjamin remained unshaken. He looked Guise in the eye. "Blackrock provides the steel, the stone, and the security. Therefore, Blackrock deserves a significantly higher share of the revenue." This appeal to strength and profit softened Guise's expression. Sensing the shift, Benjamin turned to the others, his voice ringing with confidence. He explained that without Frosttown's management, the alliance would crumble into internal strife. At a gesture from Benjamin, Sullivan stepped forward to distribute the commune bylaws. He spoke of a future trade corridor that would rival the capital itself, a win-win system where internal conflict turned into common prosperity. As the concrete benefits were laid bare, the doubts of the lords began to dissolve into the promise of gold. Sullivan's presentation lasted nearly an hour, detailing a bold vision for a regional commune. He unveiled Benjamin's hand-drawn maps, meticulous sketches of a road network connecting 5 territories with Silver Creek at its heart. When Sullivan estimated that toll fees would recoup all investments within a few years, the room shifted. The Baron of Stonebridge stopped his restless tapping, and the elderly Baron of Ashmarsh slowly opened his eyes. Sullivan emphasized that this wasn't just any road, it was a durable asset built with Baron Blackwood's superior technology. Lord Erwin Hawthorne leaned in, noting that cooperation would slash costs by 40 to 60%. The room grew tense as the lords haggled over resources, sensing the frict. Benjamin stepped forward with a compromise. Frosttown, lacking the gold of its neighbors, would provide technical supervision, specialized tools, and high-quality charcoal at a discount. Furthermore, Benjamin offered to relinquish half of Frosttown's dividends for the first 3 years. This sincerity won them over. The lords reached an agreement. Blackrock and Silver Creek would provide the bulk of the stone and guards, while Frosttown remained the indispensable technical lead. A five-member council was formed, and as the sun set, the five lords signed the parchment. The Baron of Stonebridge wiped sweat from his brow, dreaming of gold-filled caravans, while the old Baron of Ashmarsh simply hoped to see the finished road before his time passed. Weeks later, the spring sun warmed the outskirts of Frost Town. The air was thick with the sound of pounding earth and clanging stone. Benjamin, wearing a strange safety helmet of rattan and leather, was busy directing workers when Chesvia approached. "Oh, Chief Engineer Ben," she teased. Startled, Benjamin slipped into his old-world habits. "Oh, no, please just call me Benjamin," he stammered with a humble workplace smile. Chesvia burst into laughter until tears formed. Benjamin, realizing his slip, tried to recover his dignity. "A mistake. From now on, call me Chief Manager Ben instead." They sat together on a pile of stones, watching the road take shape. Benjamin estimated the first phase would be open in a month, finally resuming trade with BlackRock. They spoke briefly of his sister Maria's studies before Chesvia's expression turned grave. "I have something important to discuss," she said, her voice dropping. "I've figured out the purpose of that green liquid you found in the cave." Benjamin sat up straight. "It's astonishing," she whispered. "You need to see it for yourself." Benjamin stood up abruptly, his relaxed face hardening into a mask of concentration. "Let's go," he said, gesturing to Sullivan before following Chesvia away from the bustling construction site. They crossed the awakening town to a secluded two-story laboratory Benjamin had designed specifically for her research. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs and pungent chemicals. Chesvia led him past shelves of distillation equipment to a curtained area in the back. She lit an oil lamp, its flickering glow revealing the horrors within. "The initial tests were ordinary," Chesvia whispered, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "until I used it on living things." She pointed to a pot covered in wire mesh. Inside sat a cabbage, but it was unrecognizable. Swollen to 5 times its size, its leaves were a sickly, fluorescent dark green, pulsing with thick blue veins like a living heart. Next to it, in a metal cage, lay a clump of pink, throbbing flesh. It had no face, no limbs, only twisted vessels and budding organs. From a few stray hairs, Benjamin realized with a shudder, it had once been a rat. "A tiny drop caused this," Chesvia explained grimly. "Growth is wildly accelerated, but it comes with uncontrollable, distorted mutations. This liquid is man-made, Benjamin. It is the same technology that created those hybrid insect monsters. Someone is behind this, and they are malicious." Benjamin stared at the wriggling mass, his mind racing. The sight didn't just bring fear, it brought a cold, hard clarity. Power asterisk, he thought. I need real power. Not a simple town guard, but a true army to crush whatever was lurking in the mountains. He turned to Chesvia, his voice resolute. "You are right. This is a man-made disaster. Continue your research, but only if it is safe. Our priority is stability." Leaving the lab, Benjamin went straight to the blacksmith shop. Amidst the clanging of hammers, he found his brother, Gene Blackwood. "Brother," Benjamin said, his eyes sharp, "stop making hoes and axes. I need you to expand, recruit apprentices. We are going to forge longswords, spears, and armor. I am building the army of Frostbite." Gene's eyes widened, but seeing the fire in Benjamin's gaze, he nodded fiercely. "Leave it to me. I'll forge you the best steel in the land." Finally, Benjamin sought out Walter at the training grounds. "Intensify the drills," Benjamin ordered. "No more simple slashing. I want tactical formations, reconnaissance, and absolute discipline. We are no longer just protecting against beasts. We are preparing for war." As night fell, Benjamin sat in his study, the flickering candlelight illuminating a new set of blueprints. He was no longer drawing roads or houses. He was sketching the fortifications of a fortress, planning for a future where only the strong would survive. In the quiet sanctuary of her laboratory, Chesvia spreads her hands in a gesture of helpless frustration. Despite her brilliant mind, the fundamental laws of this land, which prohibit gunpowder and electricity, have left her stymied. She gestures towards sketches of ballistas and improved crossbows, admitting to Benjamin that her breakthroughs in agriculture and medicine cannot easily translate to the battlefield. "My thinking," she sighs, "is limited by the framework of this era." Benjamin offers an understanding nod, but Chesvia's expression suddenly shifts to one of gravity. She explains that the true power of the continent's behemoth, the Pale Church, lies not in wealth but in quantity asterisk. The pale goddess is exceptionally generous with miracles, allowing the church to field entire knightly orders composed of favored individuals who wield the terrifying blade of thought. Then she makes a bold proposal. Benjamin should introduce a mild faith into frostbite. If they can garner even a weak response from a god, they might cultivate their own supernatural deterrence. Benjamin listens, his fingers tapping the table. While he no longer denies the existence of miracles, the idea of surrendering his people's minds to an unknown entity fills him with instinctive unease. I need time to weigh this, he decides. For now, we focus on what we can control. The following weeks are a blur of industry. Under Jean's tireless management, the blacksmith shop rings with the sound of hammers forging spearheads and chainmail. On the training grounds, Walter transforms the guard into a disciplined elite force through grueling live-fire exercises in the forest. Yet progress is expensive. Sullivan, the treasurer, brings dire news. The gold shields are nearly gone. To save the territory from bankruptcy, Benjamin pivots to commerce. He instructs Sullivan to market their new concrete as a high-end luxury building material for the local nobility. More importantly, he orders a secret expedition into the Grey Whisper Forest to find the poor man's stone, coal. Benjamin knows a secret the rest of the world does not. If he can turn that coal into coke, he can smelt steel of a quality never before seen. Late that night, Benjamin sits alone, staring at his map. His eyes drift to the reports on the continent's great churches. Chesvia's suggestion of faith remains a thorny, tempting shortcut, a mystery he may soon be forced to unravel. Far away in the capital, at the very heart of a brewing storm, Princess Celia Windsor dragged her weary body back to her secluded residence. Dismissing her maids with a sharp wave, she finally let the mask of the poised hero princess slip, revealing only deep exhaustion and a heavy, lingering worry. The daytime court meetings had been a war without gunfire. Her eldest brother, backed by the iron-fisted traditional nobility, and her younger brother, the king's arrogant favorite, had reached a breaking point. The air in the palace was thick with the scent of gunpowder, as if a single spark might ignite a full-blown civil war. Their father's sudden death had left a vacuum of power, and while the senile king likely intended the throne for his third son, Celia knew she could no longer stand idly by. She had the people's love, she had the respect of the enlightened few, but in the eyes of the powerful, she was an outsider. Her foundation was thin, built more on the songs of wandering poets than on political steel. Celia's gaze drifted to the pile of letters on her desk. She reached out, her heart sinking as she read the reports from her former companions. Calvin was drowning in battle reports and ruthless suppressions. Lauren was being undermined by the spiteful nobles of Golden Ear Valley, and Ella was facing a violent miners' riot in the harsh lands of Ironforge. Only Finn and Livia seemed to have found a semblance of peace. Finally, her fingers brushed a letter from the western border. It was from Benjamin Blackwood, the man who always brought surprises and laughter. His fiefdom, Frostfire, was the poorest and most remote of them all, yet his letter was perfectly sealed and strangely heavy. Curiosity piqued, Celia broke the wax. Benjamin's casual, neat handwriting leaped off the page, his voice practically echoing in the room. To our beloved Captain Celia, mired in the quagmire of nobility, I hope the infighting hasn't diminished your spirit of splitting dire wolves in two. Everything is fine in Frostfire, though perhaps a little frozen. My duties now include teaching men older than my father how to mix mud, and debating with a gardener magician on how to make wheat grow wilder than weeds. We are building roads in a frenzy and starting a regional development commune. Don't worry about us, Captain. Focus on those old foxes in the capital. A helpless, genuine laugh escaped Celia's lips. The crushing weight of the day seemed to evaporate. She seized her quill, intending to send a brief reply, but the words began to pour out of her. She wrote of the hypocrisy of the court, her fears for her friends, and the deep, biting loneliness of her position. When she finally stopped, she realized she had covered both sides of the parchment in ink. A faint blush rose to her cheeks. I think I've written a bit too much, she whispered to the empty room, but then she felt a rare sense of relief. She folded the paper gently and tucked it into an envelope. She murmured, probably won't mind. The warm spring sunshine bathed the path from Silverstream to Frosttown as Evelyn, a lithe woman in dark leather hunting gear, guided her chestnut mare at a leisurely pace. A rapier hung at her waist, and her sharp, inquisitive eyes missed nothing. As she approached the outskirts, she tightened her reins. Before her lay a bustling construction site, but it was unlike any she had ever seen. Laborers worked in orderly coordination, laying a road with a sophisticated, layered foundation of compacted stone and gravel. A strange, heavy object was being pulled by a team of men, hitting the earth with a rhythmic thump, thump, thump. "Hey, miss," a dark-skinned foreman shouted, waving his rough hands. "Construction is dangerous. Move along and don't think you're stealing our secrets." Evelyn remained calm. "I mean no harm. Where does this road lead?" The foreman's tone softened with pride. "To Blackrock territory. Our Lord Baron Benjamin Blackwood personally drew the plans and taught us the way of it." Intrigued, Evelyn spurred her horse toward the town center. At the gates, she was met by guards in leather armor who conducted a disciplined interrogation, a level of order rare in such barren lands. Inside, the town hummed with activity. Men and women worked with a sense of purpose, their faces lacking the usual numbness of the impoverished. She marveled at new, sturdy houses built of a strange, gray-blue stone, arranged with careful planning for drainage and light. Evelyn reached the Baron's modest stone mansion and requested an audience. She waited for 2 hours, watching the estate function like a well-oiled machine. Finally, a serene young woman named Sarah led her into a small study. Inside, 2 men sat hunched over ledgers and drawings. The younger man, Baron Benjamin, looked to be in his early 20s. He was pale, with dark circles under his eyes as if he had been punched twice, yet his gaze was piercing. He was barking orders to his assistant, Suleiman, about iron shipments and gold shields. "Ms. Evelyn," Benjamin finally looked up, his tone impatient. "I'm busy, please get to the point." Evelyn did not take offense. Instead, she moved with soldier-like decisiveness. She dropped to one knee, her hand over her heart. "Lord Benjamin Blackwood," she spoke clearly. "I am Evelyn. I have come on Lord Hill's orders to report to you and offer all possible assistance." The name Hill acted like a spell. Benjamin's hand froze midair. Suleiman's pen stopped, leaving a dark blot of ink on the page. The room fell into a heavy, sudden silence, as the 2 men fixed their sharp, scrutinizing gazes upon the woman kneeling before them. Hill, a name synonymous with mystery and unfathomable depth. As the most enigmatic member of the hero's party, her background remains a shadow. Now a powerful lady governing the kingdom's volatile northern border, she sits at the heart of a political vortex. Why would someone so consumed by affairs of state send an envoy to Benjamin, her former servant in this remote, impoverished region? Benjamin's face remained an impassive mask, though doubt gnawed at him. "How has Hill been lately?" he asked. Evelyn, kneeling on one knee, replied with a calm, even voice. "Lady Hill is well. She is currently occupied with border friction and internal strife in the north, and is unable to visit in person. She has sent me ahead to await your orders." Benjamin's vigilance did not waver. "Raise your head," he commanded. Evelyn looked up. Her features were sharp, her wheat-colored skin weathered by travel. Her eyes were clear and resolute like polished flint. "You say she sent you to help?" Benjamin leaned forward, exuding a cold pressure. "How did she know I needed help, and who, exactly, are you?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I am the scout captain of the Grey Eagle mercenary group. I specialize in reconnaissance, tracking, and less honorable aspects. Lady Hill knows you are new to this barren frontier. She knows your difficulties are unimaginable." Benjamin remained skeptical. "Words are meaningless. Do you have a note, a token?" "Lady Hill is cautious," Evelyn replied. "She sent only a message. She said, 'Tell that guy who stares blankly at the stars that the north is just as bright as the emerald forest was 6 years ago, but the wind is colder. Tell him I have some old, dusty maps he can copy, so he won't lead the group into a giant bee's territory again.'" Benjamin froze. A flicker of reminiscence softened his gaze. That camping trip, the cold wind, the maps. It was a private joke known only to their inner circle. "Get up, Ms. Evelyn," Benjamin said, his knee finally relenting. After dismissing her to a guest room, Benjamin turned to his advisor, Sullivan. The room grew heavy. "What do you think of this guest?" "An informant," Sullivan snapped, "sent to observe and report. Her assistance is a mere excuse for surveillance." Benjamin's lips curled into a cold smile. An informant, perhaps, but why waste a free laborer? If she wants to help, we shall not be polite. Give her the tedious chores, inventorying warehouse clutter, mediating village disputes, and monitoring garbage disposal. Let us see how long this elite scout lasts, before the trivialities of this territory wear her down. Sarah led Evelyn to a guest room, a space of stone walls and wooden furniture that spoke of the region's rustic poverty. Yet, as Evelyn set down her meager belongings, she looked beyond the simplicity. She remembered the unprecedented road building and the busy, hopeful faces of the townspeople. This land and its young baron were far more complex than they appeared. Beneath the barren facade lay a burgeoning, indescribable ambition. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Administrator Sullivan stood at the door, wearing a formulaic, bureaucratic smile and clutching a daunting stack of documents. With a tone of practiced sincerity, he explained that while the baron wished for her to rest, the newly established territory was desperately short-handed. He handed her the heavy burden. Evelyn flipped through the pages, the paper rustling, and found a mountain of tedious peripheral work. There were faded household registers to rewrite, lists of moldy warehouse junk to categorize, and fragmented reports of neighborhood disputes over water and boundaries. It was clear these tasks were designed to keep her away from the core of military and financial affairs. "Is this the assistance the baron requires?" Evelyn asked, her voice calm. Sullivan's smile didn't waver. He spoke of foundations and integration, calling it an internship period to see if she could truly play a greater role. Evelyn simply nodded, hugging the documents to her chest. As Sullivan turned to leave, his polite mask slipped into a genuine smirk. He wanted to see how long this scout captain would last. But over the following days, Evelyn became a tireless machine. She was everywhere: the office, the cluttered warehouses, the bickering crowds, performing with such perfect, emotionless efficiency that Sullivan grew even more wary. "She is too perfect," he later reported to Baron Benjamin. "Either she has incredible endurance, or she is using these tasks to study the true workings of our lower levels." Meanwhile, the territory began to breathe. The first gravel road to Blackrock was finished, allowing a convoy of charcoal to depart and bringing in the first stable tax revenue. In the blacksmith shop, the ring of hammers signaled the forging of the first standard spearheads. Deep in the mountains, a secret coal vein was discovered, a discovery Benjamin immediately moved to protect. And in the fields, hope was sprouting. New wheat seeds, sown in freshly turned soil, caught the golden sunlight, reflecting the expectant faces of a people finally looking toward the future. The family sat around the rough, long table in the baron's mansion. Under the soft lamplight, Anna looked at her children. Their faces were tired but no longer numb. A long-lost warmth welled up in her heart. "Benjamin," she suggested softly, "the shop is doing well and we have finally settled in. Shouldn't we find time to celebrate?" Sarah, the fourth sister, nodded in agreement while little Marie's eyes lit up with wonder. "The banquet," she pleaded, tugging at Benjamin's sleeve. "Brother, I want to eat sweet treats." To Benjamin, a man who had spent his life struggling just to survive, the idea of a banquet felt foreign, distant, almost absurd, but seeing the spark in Marie's eyes, he relented. "All right," he whispered, "but just the family. We'll keep it simple." Even Sullivan, the weary administrator, supported the idea. He noted that while they lacked the gold for a grand inauguration, a small, intimate gathering was a good start. Benjamin agreed, limiting the guest list to the Blackwood family and his key advisors, Sullivan, Walter, and Chesvia. But who would organize it? Benjamin was a pragmatist. Asking him to decorate was like asking him to go mining. Walter, the commander, would likely use spears as decorations and treat the dinner table like a battlefield. And Sullivan, the poor man, was so overworked he had dark circles under his eyes larger than the eyes themselves. The task fell to the Minister of Agriculture, Miss Chesvia. When the news reached her lab, Chesvia was furious. She stormed into Benjamin's study, her hands still splattered with mud. "Benjamin, my wheat seedlings are in a critical period. I am a minister, not a grand steward." Benjamin played his trump card. "You are in charge of everything," he coaxed. "Decorate it however you want, spend the budget as you see fit, think of it as a break." The temptation of total creative control worked. Chesvia's anger vanished, replaced by a glimmer of excitement. She quickly borrowed Sarah and Anna, and the group piled into a rickety carriage to head for Silverbrook territory. Benjamin, worried about their safety, ordered a grumbling Walter to follow on horseback as their guard. As they traveled, Chesvia turned the carriage into a classroom. "Marie, Sarah," she chirped, If we have 15 copper coins left and beef is 1 coin and 2 pence per pound, how much can we buy? When the girls struggled, Marie leaned out the window to ask the stern, armored knight, "Uncle Walter, do you know the answer?" Walter, the great champion, fidgeted in his saddle, his face turning redder than his leather armor. "Just buy enough to eat," he barked gruffly. "Why bother calculating?" Inside the carriage, the women burst into laughter, their oi echoing across the fields as they rode toward their celebration. The market in Silverbrook was a whirlwind of noise and color, many times more bustling than the quiet streets of Frostwind Town. Chesvia moved through the crowd with purpose, clutching a meticulously prepared shopping list in one hand while leading young Maria by the other. Sarah and Mrs. Anna followed close behind, their eyes wide as they took in the dazzling array of goods. A few steps back, Walter followed like a silent, conspicuous shadow. His sharp eyes scanned the perimeter, even as he resignedly acted as a human luggage rack. Whenever the women purchased something heavy, bags of flour or large chunks of smoked meat, it was naturally handed to him. Chesvia was in her element, using her keen knowledge of crops to select only the freshest seasonal fruits. She even traded her own dried herbs for packets of vibrant plant dyes, planning to craft decorations herself. But the pleasant atmosphere shifted when Maria, captivated by a stall, ran a little too fast and bumped into a passerby. The man was tall, clad in mismatched leather armor with a curved sword at his waist. His expression was cold, hard. Behind him stood several other wary-looking men. "I'm sorry," Maria squeaked, her face turning pale. Mrs. Anna and Sarah quickly shielded the girl, offering profuse apologies. The man merely frowned, waved a dismissive hand, and vanished into the crowd. Walter's brow furrowed. He noticed their equipment was inconsistent, not the standard-issue gear of the Silverstream soldiers, but the look of a mercenary squad. He spotted others like them lurking in the corners of the market, a large mercenary group in this peaceful territory. It was unusual. He felt the urge to follow, but seeing Chesvia and the others walking away, he suppressed his doubts to prioritize their safety. The mood recovered quickly when Chesvia bought Maria a bag of honey-hard candies. She even noticed Sarah lingering near a simple linen dress and quietly bought it for her. Finally, she picked out a small, bone-carved eagle whistle for the stern-faced Walter. "For signaling," she said casually. Walter hesitated, then awkwardly stuffed the gift into his pocket. Back at the Baron's mansion, the transformation began. Chesvia and Sarah scrubbed the deserted hall, draping the stone walls with garlands made from the newly dyed cloth. They gathered pine branches and wildflowers for a centerpiece, setting the table with a mix of old silverware and rustic pottery from the Frosttown kilns. In the kitchen, Chesvia worked like a chemist. She simmered bacon, wild vegetables, and lentils into a fragrant soup and baked sweet tuber bread until the crust was perfectly crisp. For dessert, she labored over a massive, three-tiered honey cake, using whipped egg whites and honey in place of cream. When Benjamin finally pushed open the gates, exhausted and covered in dust, he stopped dead in his tracks. The empty hall was now warm, glowing with candlelight and the scent of pine. "Brother," Maria chirped, pulling him to his seat. Benjamin laughed when he saw Walter, sitting stiffly with a crooked wreath of flowers Maria had perched atop his head. As the cake was brought out, Sullivan, the businessman, stared at the accounts in disbelief. "Minister Chesvia, you did all of this with only 5 silver shields." Chesvia smiled with quiet pride. "I'm being frugal, eat as much as you like." Benjamin stood and sliced the cake, handing the first piece to his parents and the second to Chesvia. Leaning in, he whispered, "I've truly missed this, thank you." Chesvia's lips curled into a rare smile. "Then enjoy yourself, Benjamin. There is no official business to bother you today." The banquet hall was thick with the scent of honey, egg yolk, and the rare, sweet aroma of fresh cake. Little Maria was the picture of pure joy, her face a messy canvas of cream and crumbs as she ate like a happy kitten. Beside her, Sullivan had finally set aside his ledgers and fiscal deficits. He sat in rare relaxation, sipping tart fruit tea and whispering quietly to Sarah. Even the stoic Walter, upright as a pine tree, looked softened in the candlelight, despite the comical flower wreath Marie had forced onto his head. He ate his steaming stew with a quiet, intense seriousness. Watching them all, Benjamin felt a heavy swell of emotion. He thought of his journey, from a starving serf's son trembling before tax collectors, to a traveler among heroes, and now the baron of this rugged land. He looked at the blurred lines between noble and commoner and offered a silent prayer. May Frosttown always know this simple, genuine peace. The heat of the fireplace eventually became too much. Seeking air, Benjamin slipped through a small door into the backyard. The night breeze smelled of cool grass, a sharp contrast to the noise inside. Why is the Baron hiding in the quiet? He turned to find Chesvia standing there holding a small package. She handed it to him, a gift. Inside was a quill handcrafted from durable wood and fine feathers. Benjamin ran his fingers over the smooth barrel, touched by the gesture. As they leaned against the doorframe under the sparse stars, the atmosphere turned reflective. Benjamin confessed his deepest fear, that as a leader he might be pointing his people toward a hidden cliff. Chesvia listened, her voice soft as she admitted that she too had spent most of her life simply being pushed by the tides of fate. Until she arrived here. Meeting you was more than just luck, Benjamin said sincerely, his voice low in the dark. To break the heavy mood, he began to laugh, telling her the real, unembellished stories of his days with the hero's party, like the time a vain knight had to be pulled from a swamp like a muddy radish. Their laughter was interrupted by Mrs. Anna calling from the hall. Benjamin, Chesvia, come back inside, Mariah is going to sin.
Gee.
The two shared a final look. Benjamin straightened his coat, his worries momentarily lifted. As they walked back toward the light and the music, Chesvia whispered one last encouragement. As long as you keep moving forward, the road will keep extending. Benjamin and Chesvia slipped back into the hall where the air was still thick with the scent of roasted meat and the sound of easy laughter. At the center of it all, little Marielle stood atop a sturdy wooden chair, her childish voice earnest as she sang a traditional folk song. She missed a few notes and her rhythm was far from perfect, but her innocent effort earned nothing but warm smiles from the gathered family. Benjamin settled into his seat watching the scene unfold. Sullivan, usually so stiff, was actually tapping his foot to the music, while Walter sat stubbornly with a flower wreath still perched upon his head. As the night deepened, the dinner drew to a close amidst satisfied sighs and the clatter of clearing plates. The moment the table was bare, Walter snatched the wreath from his head as if it were a hot coal. Benjamin approached him, whispering, "You worked hard today." Walter gave a stiff nod. "It was my duty," he replied before adding with rare warmth, "The banquet was very good." But the warmth didn't last. Walter's expression suddenly sharpened and he pulled Benjamin into a secluded corner. "Sir," he whispered, "at the Silverbrook market today I spotted 20 suspicious men. They looked like mercenaries, well-armed and cautious." The peace of the evening shattered. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. Mercenaries? In Silverbrook? He considered the risk, then shook his head. "Don't investigate openly. We cannot risk a misunderstanding with our partners, but strengthen the night patrols. Tell the hunters to watch for tracks in the woods." Benjamin sighed, the weight of leadership returning to his shoulders. "It seems my break has come to an early end." Meanwhile, in the heart of Silverbrook, Lord Erwin Hawthorne rubbed his tired brow. Before him lay a defense proposal from the Mountain Dog mercenary group, a thinly veiled threat. "I obey only the royal family," he whispered to the empty room, knowing full well the crown was too fractured to protect a small border town. But on the edge of town, in a flickering, shadow-drenched room, the mercenaries were already whetting their blades. Their leader Moggs stroked his scimitar, listening to a cloaked envoy from the Duke. "We don't want scorched earth," the envoy hissed from the shadows. "The Duke needs a legitimate reason to seize these trade routes. We must wait for an accident, a tragic attack by outsiders to claim Lord Hawthorne's life." Moggs grinned, a fierce glint in his eyes. "I understand. His death will be our pledge of allegiance." Walter moved swiftly to carry out Benjamin's orders, raising the alert level across Frosttown to its highest peak. Patrols were doubled and hidden outposts were carved into the edges of the forest near Silverbrook territory, but only 2 days later, the shadows began to stir. A patrol team discovered fresh hoofprints near the Grey Whisper forest. These were not the shoes of frostbite horses, they were foreign. Deep in a secluded ravine, the guards found the remains of a temporary camp. The ashes of the fire were still warm to the touch. Messy footprints and scraps of food told a chilling story. At least 20 armed men had been hiding there, deliberately avoiding the main roads. When the news reached the Baron's mansion, Benjamin immediately called an emergency meeting. Sullivan, Walter, Chesvia, and Evelyn gathered around a simple map. Walter's voice was grim as he pointed to the markings. "They are cautious," he warned. "They clean their tracks. We don't know if they have moved on or if their target is Frosttown itself." The air in the room grew heavy. Walter demanded an immediate expansion of the army to 100 men, arguing that their current force of 50 was stretched to a breaking point. However, Sullivan, the voice of reason, objected. He pointed out that conscripting more men would pull the labor force away from the fields. "If we take the men now," he argued, "the spring planting will fail, our foundation will shake." Sullivan proposed a different path: warn the neighboring lords, attract refugees to grow the population, and optimize the current defenses. Benjamin listened intently, weighing security against survival. He decided on a middle ground: strengthen the training of the existing guards to a professional standard and upgrade their equipment immediately. Then Evelyn stepped forward. She presented a detailed report exposing the blind spots in their patrols and suggesting low-cost early warning systems. Benjamin was impressed by her precision. "The task is yours, Ms. Evelyn," he declared. "Lead the construction of these outposts." After the meeting, Benjamin sought a different kind of hope. He traveled to the secret coke workshop hidden in the valley. The manager greeted him with a grin, holding up a piece of glossy, porous coke. "It's a success, sir." Inside the sweltering blacksmith shop, Benjamin's brother, Gene Blackwood, was covered in soot and sweat. "This coke burns hotter than anything I've ever seen," Gene shouted over the roar of the furnace. "The iron quality is already improving. Give me time, Benjamin, and I will forge you the finest steel in the land." Benjamin patted his brother's shoulder, a genuine smile finally breaking through his worry. The threats were closing in, but the blade of Frosttown was being tempered in the fire. Inside the quiet halls of Hawthorne Manor, Erwin Hawthorne gripped a letter from Frosthold so tightly his knuckles turned bone-white. The message from Benjamin Blackwood was restrained, yet the subtext sent a freezing chill down Erwin's spine. Armed activity had been spotted on the border. "They have reached Frosttown, Erwa." In muttered, his brow furrowing in deep concern. He had initially dismissed the threat as a mere band of wandering mercenaries, thugs he could simply pay off or hire the military might of Blackrock territory to crush. But this was different. To reach the remote, barren lands of Frosttown suggested something far more sinister than extortion. It felt like a premeditated infiltration, a harbinger of a much larger storm. Suddenly, a steward burst into the study, his face pale and trembling. "My lord, the caravan to the capital. It was attacked less than 10 miles from our border. The goods are gone, and 7 guards are dead or wounded." Erwin surged to his feet, the room spinning as he leaned heavily against his desk. This was no longer a shadow in the woods, it was a bloody provocation. Meanwhile, within the cold stone walls of Blackrock Fortress, Baron Guise slammed a heavy fist onto his oak table, sending wine glasses dancing. "That damned bastard," he roared. He held a letter sealed by the Earl of the West. "The Earl of Eagle's Nest orders me to stand idle while the royal domain burns. Who does he think he is?" His wife, Lady Alina, remained unnervingly calm as she gathered the fallen papers. "Guys, listen," she said, her voice like ice water on his rage. "The Earl speaks for the Grand Duke of the West, and the Grand Duke supports Prince Alkia." She pointed to the text. "They are telling us not to interfere so they can erode the king's lands. This is treason, guys. They are preparing for war." At the word war, the Baron's anger transformed into a wild, hungry grin. "War," he whispered, his knuckles cracking. "For others, a disaster, but for Blackrock, this is a fucking opportunity." The news reached Benjamin Blackwood shortly after. He sat in Frosthold, flanked by his advisors Sullivan, Walter, and Chesvia. Before him lay 2 letters, a desperate plea for help from Erwin and a blunt warning from the Baron. "Look at our Lord Guise," Benjamin said with a sarcastic, cold smile. "So honest, rushing to tell us the beast of war has been unleashed." Sullivan analyzed the situation calmly, noting that the Baron was drawing a line, refusing to help but waiting to see who would bleed first. Walter, however, gripped his sword hilt. "If Silver Creek falls, we are next. We cannot stand by." Benjamin's eyes sharpened as he looked at the map. "Walter is right," he declared, his voice resonating with iron resolve. "I do not care if they are called mountain dogs or hyenas. If they point a blade at our allies, they are enemies." He looked up, his gaze hard. "Sullivan, tell Erwin we are coming. Walter, ready the guards. It is time to hunt." The atmosphere inside the Royal Council Hall was as tense as a taut bowstring. Princess Celia Windsor, renowned for her bravery, stood with icy indifference, her sharp gaze sweeping over her brothers. There sat the eldest, Alcia, arrogant and cold, and the third prince, Conrad, wearing a mocking lazy smile. Just last night, Celia's voice shattered the silence, trembling with suppressed rage. The border barons who support me were attacked by bandits, their warehouses burned, their tax collectors vanished. Letters pleading for help have flooded my desk like snowflakes. Have you abandoned even the last shred of royal dignity? Her words lashed through the air like a whip. Conrad merely adjusted his embroidered cuffs, his tone dripping with sarcasm. My dear sister, have you spent too much time among the peasants to accuse your brothers without a shred of proof? Truly undignified. Celia's eyes flashed with contempt. I held on to a laughable hope that you cared for the kingdom, but your schemes are more repulsive than the sludge of the sewers. For that cold throne, you would let the borders burn and innocent people bleed. Enough, Conrad snapped, his voice like a poisonous thorn, screaming like a shrew, where is your evidence? Celia ignored him, turning instead to the silent, dangerous eldest prince, Alcia. He finally raised his eyelids, his red eyes as cold as a bottomless pool. Celia, he said flatly, there is no point in empty rhetoric. Instead of baseless accusations, you should deal with your beleaguered supporters. Their losses are very real. Alcia stood, straightening his tuxedo cuffs with superior indifference. I've had enough of this boring, playing house. Without another word, he strode out, followed by a smirking Conrad. Later, in the solitude of her residence, Celia stared at the mountain of desperate letters on her desk. She rubbed her throbbing temples, forcing herself to be calm. She knew why they had struck. News of her secret contact with the Grand Duke of the southern border had leaked. Her brothers were trying to dismantle her power before the Duke could tip the scales. She unfurled a map of the kingdom, her fingers tracing the territories of her allies. Calvin's Rockcliffe was stable, Livia's Holy Spring was protected by the church, and Hill had already consolidated the north. Finally, her gaze fell on a tiny dot in the southwest, Frostbite. She picked up a letter from Benjamin. Even in his humorous tone, he was asking for her authority to clean up the threats surrounding him. I hope you can pull through, Benjamin, she whispered. As the candlelight flickered against the darkening window, Celia picked up her pen. She began to write firm orders, words of reassurance, and strategic commands. The real storm had only just begun, and for the sake of her kingdom, she could not afford to fall. Late at night, within the Baron's study, the air hung heavy with the scent of charcoal and exhaustion. Benjamin let out a long, hollow sigh, slumping back into his chair as if his very bones had been removed. His eyes drifted blankly toward the ceiling. Scattered across his desk were frantic sketches of the crown jewel of industry, the steam engine, but the boilers and pissed. Ons mocked him with their complexity. Opposite him sat Chesvia, who had been dragged into this midnight brainstorming session. She picked up a blueprint and shook her head. Benjamin spoke weakly, admitting he had underestimated the barriers of the time. We can't even make a decent ceiling gasket, he muttered. It is just wishful thinking. Chesvia didn't offer empty comfort. She bluntly reminded him that they lacked the precision tools, the lathes and milling machines to build such dreams. Are you expecting your brother to hammer these out at the blacksmith's shop, one blow at a time? She teased. Dejected, Benjamin sat up straight. You're right, one step at a time. Chesvia pushed a different paper toward him, a plan to improve the old water wheel. Benjamin looked at it and suddenly burst into laughter. Minister, your drawing skills are abstract. This gear looks like a flattened pumpkin. The tension broke. Chesvia blushed, playfully trying to snatch the ugly drawing back, but as the laughter faded, she revealed a second set of sketches, a heavy-duty crossbow meticulously detailed. Benjamin was stunned. He realized then that while he was dreaming of engines, she was quietly building their reality. In the soft glow of the lamp, Benjamin noticed Chesvia had removed her headscarf, her snow-white hair cascading like moonlight. For a moment, he couldn't take his eyes off her. She turned red, asking what he was looking at. He quickly pivoted to the pasture improvements, earning a playful roll of her eyes. The scene shifts to the blazing sun of the training grounds at noon. Dust billows as 100 elite soldiers, the cornerstone of Frosttown's future, clash in drills. Walter, the Baron's knight, stands tall with a rare, fierce excitement. He is forging an army not just for a border town, but for the grand stage he knows Benjamin is destined for. Benjamin turned to his commander. Walter, you are my first and most trusted friend. I hope it is you who leads this army into battle. Walter didn't speak. Instead, he slammed his fist against his breastplate, a dull, heavy thud of absolute loyalty. "Continue training," Walter roared. "Show the Baron the sharpest spear and the strongest shield in Frosttown." 100 voices answered in a single deafening roar, shaking the very earth. Population is the most valuable resource. In the undeveloped wilds of Frosttown, Benjamin knows this proverb is the bedrock of survival. Without people, all grand plans are merely castles in the air. Inside his study, Benjamin meets with his shrewd administrator, Sullivan. The air is thick with the scent of fresh ink as Sullivan presents a new decree. The plan is bold: to attract refugees and landless citizens by offering 3 years of tax exemption, free tools, and superior seeds. "The kingdom is unstable, my lord," Sullivan explains. "In areas where the monarchy is weak, the people suffer. To them, Frosttown will be a beacon of light and tea." Darkness. Benjamin ponders the logistics. Attracting them is only the beginning. They must be registered, settled, and integrated into workshops or guard units. But he also worries for his current subjects. The original residents will feel unease, Benjamin warns. "We must ensure they feel respected, perhaps by granting them honorary status as founding residents to maintain internal stability." Sullivan nods, revealing further plans for a mandatory apprenticeship system to preserve the technologies brought by the scholar Chesvia. But then, the administrator's tone shifts to one of caution. He confesses to a secret gamble. Without authorization, Sullivan spread rumors that Benjamin is acting under the secret orders of Princess Celia Windsor. Benjamin's brow furrows, a flash of displeasure crosses his face. Using the princess's name provides instant legitimacy, but it risks dragging her into a dangerous political game. "I am well aware of the risks," Sullivan admits, bowing low, "but I feared your personal feelings for Her Highness would cause us to miss this golden opportunity." Silence stretches between them. Benjamin is torn between his loyalty to Celia and the harsh realities of leadership. Finally, his anger softens into a weary smile. He sentences Sullivan to a punishment of 3 cups of bitter herbal liqueur and a week's pay to be spent on sweets for the young Mari. With the tension broken, they turn back to the execution. They will use the Silver Stream caravans and traveling merchants to spread their message and perhaps, cautiously, tap into the intelligence network of the mysterious Evelyn. "Control the scale," Benjamin commands. "We must settle them carefully, lest the influx of people causes our order to collapse." A barrage of bad news rained down on Erwin Hawthorne. Yesterday, his livestock were stolen. Today, a caravan was plundered less than 5 miles from his home. The bandits moved like ghosts through the heart of Silverbrook, swift, ruthless, and vanishing before a blade could be drawn. As his reputation crumbled, Erwin's daughter, Lena, clutched his sleeve in the halls of Hawthorne Manor. "Father, you cannot go," she pleaded. "This is a conspiracy. They are luring you away." But Erwin, his eyes bloodshot with humiliation, shook her off. "Enough," he roared. "They will say I am a coward who cannot defend his own dirt." News had just arrived. 50 bandits were raiding Morton Village, barely half a day's journey away. Ignoring Lena's cries for caution, Erwin donned his ceremonial armor and turned to his men. "Assemble. Let those bastards experience the wrath of Silver Creek." 30 guards and 4 knights thundered out of the fortress. The journey was eerily smooth. Every burned farmhouse they passed only fueled Erwin's rage, blinding him to the danger. As the road narrowed between dense woods and steep hills, a veteran knight reined in his horse. "My lord, the terrain, we should send scouts." "Yes." "Scouts," Erwin spat, his voice hoarse. "Those rats wouldn't dare face us." But as the words left his lips, a whistling arrow pierced the sky, exploding into a cloud of red smoke. In an instant, the world turned to chaos. From the trees, the mountain dog mercenaries emerged like demons. From the hills, a rain of arrows fell like locusts. "Ambush!" The knights screamed, but it was too late. Horses reared in terror, infantry fell in heaps. Then, out of the flank, the mercenary captain Mogus charged, his heavy scimitar carving through the ranks like a reaper's scythe. Erwin's horse was brought down by a battle-axe, slamming the lord into the dirt. Before he could rise, cold spears were pressed against his throat. "Tie him up," Mogus barked. Hours later, the blindfold was ripped from Erwin's eyes. He was in a secluded valley camp, surrounded by the stench of blood. Mogus sat by a fire, grinning as he wiped his blade. "Who are you?" Erwin stammered, trembling with fear. "If it is ransom you want, name your price." Mogus laughed, a cruel, jagged sound. Ransom, Lord, you underestimate your own worth. Then the laughter died away. From the shadows of the camp, a figure in a gray travel cloak slowly emerged. The mercenaries stepped aside with sudden, sharp respect, as the true architect of the trap stepped into the light. The crackling campfire illuminated Erwin Hawthorne's pale, furious face. From the shadows emerged a figure in gray, Cadden, the second son of the Viscount of Wolf's Mouth. With a sneer of sinister arrogance, Cadden revealed his true purpose. He was an agent of the Earl of Erie, sent to seize Silverbrook. Leaning in close, Cadden offered two chilling paths. First, Erwin could swear allegiance to Prince Alcia and surrender his lands, retiring in hollow dignity. Or second, he could refuse and be erased from history as a rebel. When Erwin cried out for the protection of kingdom laws, Cadden merely laughed. The old king is in his grave, he mocked. Royal power is a fantasy, now might makes right. Miles away at Hawthorne Manor, the dawn brought devastating news to Erwin's daughter, Lena. Her father was captured, his army annihilated. When an envoy from Wolf's Mouth arrived, offering generous military aid to suppress the very bandits they had hired, Lena saw through the charade. This was a trap to annex her home without shedding a drop of blood. Refusing to surrender, Lena dispatched her fastest riders to the regional development commune. Her message to the neighboring lords was desperate: fulfill your promise of mutual assistance. Save my father and Silverstream will pay any price. In Frosttown, Baron Benjamin slammed the plea onto his table. He mocked Erwin's stupidity, yet he knew the danger was real. If Silverstream fell, the Western frontier forces would be at his own doorstep. Inside his study, a heated debate erupted. Sullivan, the strategist, urged a high-stakes gamble: don't just save them. Replace them, let us become the de facto rulers of Silverstream and seize its riches. But Walter, the military commander, recoiled. Our soldiers are not gambling chips, he argued, citing their lack of experience against such a cunning foe. The tension was thick until Chesvia spoke, her voice a calm bridge between greed and fear. She proposed a middle path, a limited military intervention under the guise of the commune's joint defense. Help Lena stabilize her lands, she suggested. Secure an ally, gain their gratitude, and avoid a direct war with the West. Benjamin looked at the letter, the weight of the frontier's future resting on his next word. At first glance, Chesvia's proposal seemed like a gentle plea for peace, a middle ground between Sullivan's radical aggression and Walter's cautious conservatism. But as Benjamin looked closer, he realized her words hit the nail on the head. Frosttown could not afford to provoke the Western frontier forces directly, at least not yet. To survive, they needed Silverstream territory to remain an independent buffer zone, with House Hawthorne standing firmly in the spotlight. Just as Benjamin began to weigh the risks of this limited intervention, a firm, clear voice rang out from the shadows of the study. It was Evelyn. Your Excellency, she said, stepping into the light, if we act, intelligence is paramount. She moved to the map, her finger tracing the plains of Silverstream. She argued that a force as large as the Mountain Dog mercenaries couldn't hide in the deep wilderness. They needed food, water, and stable supplies. They were likely hiding in plain sight, perhaps an occupied manor or an abandoned mine near a village. Give me a few days, she promised. I will find them. Benjamin's eyes lit up. With precise intelligence, they could launch a surgical strike, total annihilation in a single blow. Even the pragmatic Sullivan relented. He agreed to the plan, though his voice turned cold as he added a final condition. If Lord Erwin were to perish, they would pivot entirely to supporting young Lena Hawthorne, for a steep price, of course. The decision was made. Evelyn departed immediately, slipping into the twilight like a ghost on her chestnut mare. Meanwhile, the gears of Frosttown began to turn. Benjamin and Walter arrived at the military camp to handpick the elite. They didn't need an army, they needed a scalpel. They selected 5 of the finest soldiers, men of iron discipline and calm heads. In the armory, Walter distributed the best gear Jean Blackwood's forge could offer: tightly woven chainmail, fine spears, and iron-bound oak shields. Horses were scarce, and the team had to make do with a mix of war horses and sturdy pack animals, but the 7 riders trained until they moved as a single, lethal unit. On the eve of their departure, Benjamin stood before his men in the moonlight. He sharpened his longsword, his mind set. Remember our objective, he whispered. Into the silent night, locate the enemy, strike with lightning speed, and retreat. The future of Frosttown rests on this one move. The 7 riders stood ready, arrows notched, and pulled taut, waiting only for Evelyn's signal to pierce the enemy's heart. Inside the cold stone walls of Hawthorne Manor, Lena Hawthorne felt as if she were dancing on a knife's edge. She forced a mask of calm while engaging the envoy from Wolf's Mouth Fortress in a desperate war of words. She spun excuses, needing to inventory the treasury, or appeasing the panicked hearts of her people, anything to painstakingly stall for time. But the envoy's polite aggression sent chills down her spine. Worse still, her pleas for help were met with silence. The barons of Ash Swamp and Stonebridge offered only hollow excuses to protect themselves, while the powerful Blackrock territory offered no response at all. Despair, like a cold tide, engulfed her. Was the Hawthorne bloodline about to be extinguished? As Lena wept alone in her study, a figure silently climbed through the open window. Lena reached for a hidden dagger, her voice a low hiss. "Who are you?" "Miss Hawthorne, there is no need to panic." The woman's voice was calm and sharp. "I come from Frosttown on the orders of the Baron." Hope flared in Lena's eyes. The Baron of Frosttown had decided to lend a hand. The stranger, Evelyn, moved with the grace of a hawk. She demanded intelligence, caravan routes, plundered villages, and the exact location where Lena's father was ambushed. Lena quickly marked the map, pointing to a dense forest northeast of Silverbrook. "Continue to deal with the envoys," Evelyn instructed. "Soften your stance, create the illusion that you are about to surrender. This will lower their guard." With a reliable guide named Kyle at her side, Evelyn vanished into the night. Through tireless tracking, they located the enemy camp, an abandoned logging site housing roughly 50 men. They were relaxed, gambling, and roasting food, unaware of the eyes watching from the trees. Evelyn turned to Kyle. "Ride to Frosttown, tell the Baron the target is found. I will take out the sentries. When they see the camp ablaze, that is the signal to strike." Back at the gates of Frosttown, Benjamin and his elite six-man squad waited like taut bowstrings. When Kyle arrived with the news, the odds seemed impossible, 7 against 50. But Benjamin's voice remained steady and powerful. "Gentlemen, the target is locked. They are nothing more than a rabble. We will charge like thunder and crush them." He drew his longsword, the blade gleaming in the setting sun, set off. 7 warhorses neighed, their hooves striking the ground as the small cavalry vanished into the twilight. An arrow aimed straight at the heart of the enemy. The dense forest of Yingseling lay shrouded in the suffocating darkness between midnight and dawn. Benjamin's squad of 7 cavalrymen, guided by the silent Captain K. Ill, crept through the undergrowth, following the secret markings left by Lady Evelyn. A broken branch here, a cluster of stones there. Each sign led them deeper into the beech forest, avoiding the enemy's watchful eyes. 1 mile from the logging camp, Benjamin raised a clenched fist. The squad froze. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint, metallic tang of a distant campfire. Only the heavy breathing of weary warhorses broke the deathly stillness. "Walter," Benjamin whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Take Geoffrey, confirm the sentries, and find Evelyn." The 2 men vanished like shadows. 15 minutes of agonizing silence passed before they returned. Walter's voice was cold with professional relief. "The sentries are gone, sir. Evelyn has cleared the perimeter. We found her marked near the northeast tower." "Good, the most dangerous part was done." By the faint light of the stars, Benjamin and Walter traced a map in the dirt. "The main attack will hit the left flank," Benjamin commanded, pointing to an open stream. "That is where we reach maximum speed." Walter hesitated, then looked his lord in the eye. "Sir, let me lead the charge. You take the high mound. Your archery is unmatched. From there, you can pick off their leaders while we tear through the center. It is the optimal choice." Benjamin saw the loyalty in Walter's eyes, the desire to keep his lord out of the fray, but the tactic was sound. "Very well," Benjamin conceded, "but after the first wave, I descend to join the slaughter. That is an order." He gathered the men close, his voice deep and resonant. "We form a wedge. Walter, you are the tip of the blade. Aim for the largest tent. Geoffrey, you and the others consolidate the gap. Protect the flanks. Do not get bogged down in a duel. Charge through, break away, and regroup." Benjamin mounted his black warhorse, checking his quiver one last time. He looked toward the camp, his heart beating in time with the coming violence. "Wait for the signal," he hissed. "Evelyn lights the fire, and once the flames rise, we charge." Time flowed slowly in the oppressive silence, each second feeling like a taut pull on a nerve. Benjamin lay prone on the earthen slope, his gaze fixed like a hawk on the sleeping camp below. The air was thick with the scent of embers and the heavy, weary breathing of the guards. Just before dawn, in the darkest hour, boom! A bright orange flame shot up from the center of the camp, greedily licking dry wood and canvas. Fueled by the wind, the fire spread instantly, illuminating the chaos. "Enemy attack!" came the screams, shattering the silence. "Right now!" "For Frosttown, charge!" Walter let out a deep growl, spurring his horse out of the shadows like lightning. 5 riders followed close behind. The heavy thud of the first impact was sickening. A mercenary was sent flying like a catapult hit him, his chest caved in. Walter's lance didn't stop, it sent another man flying like a rag doll into a burning tent. Walter drew his gleaming longsword, aiming for the center of the camp, while Jeffrey and another burly soldier pried open any enemy attempting to close the gap. The cavalry squad was a red-hot forging hammer, crashing into the heart of the camp. Hooves trampled bodies, spears ripped through leather, hand axes cleaved open skulls. On the slope, Benjamin's mind was as still as water. His bow was drawn taut. An arrow flew with a deathly whistle, piercing the throat of a leader trying to rally his men. Another arrow struck, and a crossbowman fell dead before he could fire. Any attempt to organize was nipped in the bud. In the shadows, Evelyn darted toward the hitching post. Her dagger flashed, the reins snapped, and startled horses broke free, trampling wildly through the camp. "Hold your ground!" Mogus, the leader of the mountain dog mercenaries, burst from his tent. But before he could finish his order, an arrow struck his adjutant in the neck. Mogus paled in horror, scrambling behind a carriage to hide. Benjamin blew a sharp, short whistle. Walter heard the signal and shouted, "Retreat!" The 6 riders vanished into the darkness as quickly as they had come. At the edge of the woods, the squad regrouped. No one was lost. Benjamin looked back at the raging fire and declared, "Mount up one more time, let them think we have an ambush." They rode again, ghosts in the perimeter, shouting into the night, "For Silver Creek territory, the army of Frosttown is here." "The mercenaries will collapse. There are too many of them," someone screamed. They scattered like headless flies into the forest. Mogus, blinded by fury, charged recklessly toward the squad. Walter spurred his horse to meet him. Swords flashed, and in less than 5 rounds, Walter's blade sliced across his opponent's neck. A head filled with resentment shot into the sky, and the leader of the mountain dogs fell heavily to the ground. With the enemy collapsed and their leader slain, Benjamin raised a hand to signal the end of the slaughter. "Cease the pursuit," he commanded. "Clear the camp and search for Lord Irwin." The squad moved cautiously through the dying embers of the firelight, their voices echoing against the trees. "Lord Irwin Hawthorne, answer us!" Finally, Walter discovered a collapsed wooden shed at the edge of the camp. He shattered the lock with his blade to find a man huddled in the corner, bound tightly with rough ropes, his clothes tattered and filthy. It was Irwin Hawthorne. Benjamin stepped forward, his dagger slicing through the restraints. "Lord Irwin, you are safe now." He helped the weakened man to a nearby stump and handed him a bottle of ale. Irwin drank greedily, coughing as the harsh liquid brought color back to his pale face. "Thank you, Lord Blackwood," Irwin rasped. "How did you find me?" "It was your daughter, Miss Lena," Benjamin replied gently. "She risked everything to ask for our help." Irwin's eyes filled with a mixture of relief and guilt. "Lena, she has grown up." But his relief quickly turned to urgency. He gripped Benjamin's arm, his voice trembling with anger. "Lord Blackwood, the mastermind is the Earl of the Eyrie. He is in league with the Viscount of Wolf's Mouth. They sent his son Cadden to kill me and seize my lands. The royal family can no longer control these wolves. The world is descending into chaos." Just then, a gruff shout interrupted them. Jeffrey emerged from the shadows, dragging a struggling man by the collar. "Look what I found hiding in a haystack." The captive shrieked, "Let me go, I am the son of the Viscount. My father will have your heads." Benjamin looked at the pathetic figure and smiled grimly. "I believe we have found our villain." As the adrenaline faded, the soldiers began the rewarding task of gathering the spoils: horses, silver, and fine steel. Benjamin announced on the spot that his 6 brave cavalrymen were now promoted to the rank of sergeant. The camp hummed with a new energy as the men traded stories and inspected their loot. Jeffrey even tried to sell a captured longsword back to Benjamin, earning a playful kick from Walter. Nearby, the scout Evelyn approached. Her silent infiltration had been the key to their victory. Benjamin looked at her with deep respect. Evelyn, your internship is over. You will have a permanent place in Frosttown. With a small box of gold, 13 horses, and the captured Cadden in tow, Benjamin began the journey home. He hummed a quiet tune to himself, a new verse for the bards to sing, as the treasury of Frosttown grew a little heavier and the legend of the Blackwood name grew a little brighter.